Greetings, everyone. And welcome to a terrifying twofer edition of Monster Party.
Monster Party! It's fearsome! It's king-like! It's
classic.
Horror! It's big, massive, giant!
It's a horror powerhouse.
It is! It is! And speaking of powerhouse, who are you, sir?
For once, you're right. I am Matt Weinhold.
I am Shawn Sheridan.
I'm Larry Stroth.
And I'm James GONIS.
And this episode is very exciting because it all revolves around two luminaries, two actors.
Giants.
I mean, my God, they've shaped our lives, and they continue to make an impact to this day.
Yes, they do. Matt, what is our topic?
The topic is Karloff and Lugosi.
Karloff and Lugosi! The kings!
The two biggest horror stars,
Yes.
Boris Karloff
Yeah.
and Bela Lugosi.
And are still relevant. It's amazing.
They're household names.
Yeah.
After
all this time.
If you don't know their names, you're an idiot.
Well, you certainly know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you
totally.
see their faces, you go, okay, I know who that is.
And these
Absolutely.
two giants, I mean, there's so much information about them. But Matt, how can we go through this? How can we talk about these guys? Who can we get?
I have no idea. Sean?
Yeah. We do have the perfect guest for this huge topic.
Perfect guest.
This gentleman is a writer. He's a film historian. He's been a teacher, an actor. He has done.
I could tell by the looks.
Yeah, he is an authority on this subject tonight.
Authority.
He has written many books on classic horror cinema. Among them, Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, The Story of a Haunting Collaboration. It's Alive, the classic cinema saga of Frankenstein.
One of my
Alive.
favorite books of all time.
Fantastic book. Hollywood's Maddest Doctors.
Maddest Doctors.
And many other books. He's done
Countless.
He's contributed to documentaries, and he's been interviewed for lots of different.
And God help him, he's here.
Yes. But he's done DVD commentaries for classic horror films. He's been involved with a lot of documentaries on the subjects, and he is a true authority on this subject. Please welcome Greg MANK.
Greg Mann!
Thank you.
Welcome.
Wow. An
Thank you.
authority
Yes,
on
truly.
Karloff and Lugosi.
We're very happy to have you.
A pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
We had sandwiches, we had laughs.
We did.
And now
We've
look what
done it
we're doing.
all.
Yes.
That's right.
But I want to get into this. I mean, Karloff and Lugosi, these two giants, and maybe we can talk about how they started out. I also want to know some myths. There's some myths about
but I
these
think
guys.
also right at 1931, as the original Dracula and the original Frankenstein came out, before that kind of pivotal moment in cinema, Karloff and Lugosi, they were obviously not huge stars yet. Where were their status at that time, right before they hit it big with each of their films?
Well, with Lugosi, of course, he had done Dracula on Broadway.
Right.
But it really hadn't transferred into a big film success for him yet. I mean, he was still hoping. In fact, he was still fighting an uphill battle in order to get the movie. To get the role of Dracula in the movie. Universal was testing all kinds of people.
My understanding is he was not the first choice.
No, he was not.
Surprising.
They were. I mean, if they could have gotten Lon Chaney, they would have been thrilled. Universal would have been absolutely thrilled.
Chaney
Lon Chaney Sr. But, of course, Chaney Sr. died in August of 1930. So, and the film started shooting the following month in September. So it really was just fate that Lugosi happened to be in the right place at the right time to get the role in the movie. Chaney's bad fortune was Bela's good fortune, and so he got the role. But a lot of other people tested,
But the play was a pretty big success, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So he was getting good reviews for it, and he was.
And they got a lot of people from the play.
They did. They got the fellow who played Mina's father came from there. They really were in an interesting situation with that because nobody wanted to do the movie. I mean, everybody at Universal told Carl Laemmle Jr., "You're crazy to make this picture. I mean, this is a really nasty movie. I mean, this Valentino from hell who's coming into
I like that
into ladies' boudoirs at night and biting them on the neck. I mean, who wants to see this? I mean, this is a terrible
Everyone.
thing. Everyone.
Right.
And so they were, you know, it was a real battle to get the movie made, real battle for Lugosi to get the part. But of course he did, and everything was history after that. So he was, you know, he went from being obscure as a movie name, fairly obscure,
right,
to suddenly being an overnight sensation.
Can I ask you a question about his language skills at this point? Now, was he able, by the time he accepted the role of Dracula, did he have some basic language skills? Because I know that before this, he would often learn his lines phonetically.
That's right. He would learn them phonetically. Well, that's a good question, a very good question, because one of the big debates in the Karloff and Lugosi situation is Karloff was always under the impression that Lugosi had not mastered the English language.
Yeah.
And that this was holding him back. That if he had really applied himself more to learning to speak English more comfortably, that he would have been much more at home in Hollywood, in the business, in everything he was doing, and that this was one of the things that made him uncomfortable and kind of in a bad bargaining position throughout much of his career. Now, if you talk to other people, such as his wife at the time, Lillian, she said he spoke perfect English. Of course, she also spoke Hungarian. So I guess at home
It sounded perfect
both.
to her.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounded perfect to her.
Now, Greg, maybe you can. Okay, this is one of the myths I'd like to get from the expert. Okay, so now I've heard, when he did Dracula movie, he learned his lines phonetically. Well, the truth of the matter is, he had been doing the play.
Oh yes,
for a long time.
Oh yeah.
And I had read this story about he had done a play called The Red Poppy, and this was like one of the first plays that he was going to do, and he had to learn some English, and he was terrified.
That's right.
And he got some help learning these lines. And one of the things that the director loved about Lugosi at this part, the character had to have kind of a strong accent, but sometimes when Lugosi would do his line, sometimes he'd forget and he'd say the lines in German. which was really interesting. The director loved it because he felt that it made Lugosi more like the character in the play.
Yes, that's a great story. Well, the Red Poppy, yes, that was the play he did where he claimed that he made love so passionately to the leading lady that he cracked her ribs. That's right.
I've done that.
Okay.
That's Bela. He told good stories, but so that is a very good point. The language thing is always a controversy as to how well he may have spoken the language.
So what he did when he was doing the play, there was a certain style to say the way he said the lines, like "Good evening,"
that's right.
and "Listen, children." This was the style that this character in this play would speak, and he basically brought it with him when he did the movie. So when people say, "Well, he learned the lines phonetically," no, that's not true. That is not true. He actually
maybe originally he did.
Maybe originally, but by the time he did the film, he knew exactly what he was saying, and he was working both from the inside out and the outside in. He was Carl always said he was a great technician. Lugosi was a great technician, meaning he used his voice, he used his eyes, he used his gestures so well. But I think if you watch Lugosi, you see also that he was a very well motivated actor. I mean, there's a lot of emotion bubbling up there whenever you see him acting, and so obviously he was not just going through motions. It was really raging inside of him.
And the patience to learn something phonetically says a lot about your professionalism.
Absolutely. So yeah, he was a remarkable actor and an incredible presence. And so of course when he did Dracula, it's hard to imagine anybody else having done the part at that time, even with all the Draculas that have followed. You think of the 1931 Dracula, think who else could possibly have come down that staircase, and listen to the Children of the Night. I mean, there's nobody else that could have actually pulled that off.
Apart from Chaney, do you know who else was considered?
All kinds of people. Paul Muni, for example.
Yes.
I could see why he was considered. Yeah.
Paul Muni was up for it, and probably would have been a good contender. Conrad Veidt apparently was also, but Conrad Veidt went back to Germany. He was not comfortable in the language at that point, and he went back home at that time. But thank God they got Lugosi, because it's an immortal performance, and he is brilliant, and it's just. As many times as I've seen the film, he just amazes me every time I see him.
He elevates the movie.
He does.
Because, there have been a lot of comparisons to the Spanish version that was being filmed simultaneously with the Bela Lugosi's Dracula, with the Todd Browning one.
Right.
It was filmed at night.
Yeah.
When with Lugosi and the team, they were done for the day, they would leave.
Right.
And then the Hispanic crew would
That's
come.
correct.
On the same sets.
Yeah, and it was amazing to see how almost like a play. The English language version is, and then you see the Spanish version. There's all this camera work and some incredible shots. And in the Todd Browning version, it's Lugosi. He's the one who keeps you riveted. That you don't notice half the time that it's really just two people in a shot talking.
That's exactly right. His presence is so powerful that he really carries the film. I mean, being as static as it is, every time he comes on, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Boom. Okay. Now we're there. Yeah. So no, he was a wonderful actor, and presence again is such an important thing for an actor to have, to be able to walk on screen and hold that kind of interest.
Sure.
And he had it on stage. He had it on the screen. And Dracula was a perfect fit for him. It just was. It really was.
Now, people also don't realize that Lugosi was not in his late 20s or 30s. He was actually like 47 years old.
That's right.
Wow.
When
That's right.
Oh yeah,
He looks terrific.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
He looks great. But he had quite a life before he got to this part.
Yes, he did. He had been all through all kinds of turmoil in Hungary. And
people don't realize he came from a fairly wealthy family. They had money. There was a little elegance in his family. And so some people feel that his mannerisms actually came from that background. But he actually fought in World War I. Yeah. And he got in the Hungarian army, and he actually got injured several times.
That's right.
So this is a guy who was a bit of a badass. Before everyone goes, oh, it's Lugosi with the cape. This dude, he fought.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
In a very violent war.
Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, it's interesting that he actually went to see Frankenstein, which, of course, he had been considered for the monster, and he went to see the movie. And the movie apparently very much upset him because of the climax where Karloff's monster is burning in the windmill.
Yes.
It reminded him of what he had seen in World War I.
Really?
Seeing his comrades burning alive.
Wow.
And apparently he went and met with some of his friends after seeing the movie, and they said he was in tears. He was so upset because he said that the sight of Karloff's monster, screaming and yelling and all that in the mill, and upset him so badly. And they said he kept sitting there at the table imitating Karloff, the way he waves his hands and all this, and he said he was just heartbroken. That had really gotten to him.
Yeah.
Well, that is a very powerful scene.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and it really broke Lugosi's heart to see that. But yeah, he had remarkable, and he had that presence all of his life. It's a funny story about Lugosi that his last wife told me, Hope. She said he really didn't see at that point. His fortune had dwindled, and certainly, and they were living in a very small Hollywood apartment.
Yeah.
And
he was doing the Ed Wood film.
Oh, yeah. And things had hit bottom. And he said, I want to go see my houses one night. He said, I want to go see my houses. So he didn't drive, but she did. And so she said, like 11 o'clock at night, he suddenly decided this. So she said they got in the car and they went to 3 different houses he had lived in during his, golden years in Hollywood during his prime. And went up to each one, and he just walked up. 11:15 at night at this point, knocked on the door. People got out of bed. They came to the door, opened the door.
He said, good evening.
And there he was. He said, I am Bela Lugosi, and I have come to see my house. And they said, fortunately, all the people had known he had lived there at one point. Of course, the selling power of the house. This used to be Bela Lugosi's house. And they were all thrilled. I mean, nobody said, you woke me up. I mean, who would dare say that to him, right?
Right.
And he was, and they took him in, and she said he was in a really, great mood that night, and he just loved seeing these houses, and the people were thrilled to see him.
Wow.
Yeah.
They didn't offer him
That's
wine,
amazing.
though, I guess.
So at this time with Lugosi, like you said, he was known for the play. He reprised that role in the film, whereas Karloff, before Frankenstein, he was pretty much just an extra player, right? I mean,
well, he was doing pretty well. It's a very good question. It's an interesting thing I can respond to that, and that is that at the time that he did Frankenstein, doing some research, I found his address where he was living at the time. And he was living in the Whitley Heights area of Hollywood, near Highland Avenue and that area. And I went looking for the house one time. This was about 10 years ago. And trying to find this address, and there was this gate, and it was a Sunday, and the gate was open. As it turned out, they were trying to sell the house or lease it where he had lived. So I had read somewhere the house was at the top of 100 steps. So I started to count. Sure enough, 100 wooden steps going up this hillside.
No.
You got up to the top, and there was this lovely Spanish-style house, and there was a plaque on it. And it said, you know, Boris Karloff's home, 1930 to 1932 or something of that nature. I think the years were a little bit off, but it was where he was living at the time of Frankenstein. And it was a really nice house. I mean, it was up on the hill. It had a lovely view. So he was doing well enough at that point. I mean, doing films like The Criminal Code and Five Star Final and these other films in 1931. That he was living pretty well. I mean,
they weren't big roles, but he worked a lot.
Steady work, and some of them were very good, like the Five Star Final role. He was really very impressive in that, really pretty creepy. And and so he was doing well enough that he was living in a lovely home, in a lovely spot, and you know, it was moving along fairly well. Making about $500 a week as a freelancer, which was good money.
So he wasn't signed to a contract yet. He was
Not yet.
freelancing.
Not yet.
Okay.
And so when Universal got him for Frankenstein, they put him like on a tentative contract, in which basically the way it worked was that if the film was a success, they had him. If the film was not a success, they could drop him, you know, through the trapdoor almost right away. Right.
Almost nothing has changed.
That's right. That's right. Very compassionate folks. So they that's what they did. So of course it took off, and then they kept him on, you know, for a long time.
Right.
But yeah, he was actually doing better than is commonly believed at that time in 1931.
I hear,
not great though.
There's tell me then if this is maybe just a myth or that it was not true, but somewhere I read that, you know, when Lugosi was first offered the role of Frankenstein, he passed on it because he was kind of upset with the fact it wasn't a speaking role. And supposedly I read that he said, oh, but I know this guy, this other bit player, Boris Karloff, why don't you ask him? And that he was the one who suggested to Universal Karloff.
No,
is that true?
No,
or?
that's not it. That's not
That's
it.
what I'm wondering, because that was...
I think we might have someone who...
Yeah. Well, we
Can I say my rumor?
Okay.
Let me say
Sure, why
my
not?
rumor, and then so
And then I'll make up one.
No, the story that I heard is Lugosi had nothing to do with it. It had to do with the James Whale eating at the commissary
I
and
read that
looking
one too.
across and seeing the gaunt Karloff eating his food, and I thought to myself, "Oh, the poor Karloff. That's why I thought he wasn't doing well."
Is that correct,
He's eating
Fred?
like beans and rice, you know, and he was kind of like gaunt, and he goes, "That guy looks like a cadaver. I think he would be great as the monster." So here you have two stories.
Two stories.
You're the expert. You tell us.
Well, I wasn't there, but I would have to say that certainly the evidence seems to support the story that James Whale saw him in there.
So I'm right.
I'm not purporting.
He wasn't there either.
Yeah, I happened to read that.
But that does not change the fact that Lugosi did tell that story, and he told it a lot.
No.
He told it a lot.
Is it maybe a mixture of the two, possibly?
Well, I don't know. I think what Lugosi said eventually...
Lugosi was eating from the commentary.
The commentary.
Karloff saw him and said, "You look like you should not be in Frankenstein." And James Whale heard that. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. But no,
Was it beans and rice?
Yeah, that's right. No, Lugosi, I think he got to the point he actually believed it. That you know, that I mean, he told us so many times. It became pretty much the gospel truth in his house. In fact, one of the very first people. Interesting, I was thinking about this when we came out here. One of the very first people I ever interviewed, in fact, I think maybe the very first, was Lugosi's wife, Lillian. Okay. It would have been his fourth wife, and who knew him at the time of Dracula and Frankenstein, but hadn't yet married him.
Okay.
Okay.
And she absolutely believed Bela's story about Lugosi finding Karloff and putting him in the film. And she always kind of resented that Karloff had not given public credit to Lugosi for doing this. Well, I think, honestly, the reason Karloff didn't give proper credit is because it didn't happen. You know,
Right.
And you know, it's very
Tiny
interesting
detail.
to consider that, you know, in 1957, Karloff was on This Is Your Life.
Yes.
Right.
And you figure that if Lugosi had still been alive, he had died in 1956, but if Lugosi were still alive, you figure they probably would have tried to put him on that This Is Your Life show.
Sure,
Absolutely.
And wouldn't it have been interesting if Lugosi came out and said, you know, back in 1931, I was supposed to do the Frankenstein monster, and I found this man and said he's the one to do it and gave him the break of his life. Well, what Karloff would have said, you really wonder how he would have responded to that and said, now, Bela, I'm sorry, I can't take it anymore. That never happened. Or whether he would have just said, well, very good to see you, old boy, and left it at that.
Probably,
Probably.
You know, I've heard a story, too, about how Karloff really didn't like Jack Pierce that much for a couple of reasons. But when he appeared, when Jack Pierce showed up on This Is Your Life, Karloff, his words were, "This is the best makeup man in Hollywood."
Yes.
Karloff was always that kind of guy. I think that if Lugosi said that, my personal feeling is Karloff would have been the kind of guy to kind of brush it off or say, "Oh, there were so many stories. I don't know what's true."
That's right.
But yeah,
That's right.
I don't think he would have. This is my personal opinion, but it just seems like Karloff was always that nice, classy guy.
That's right.
Right.
And he would have avoided confrontation. He was.
Right.
He really was. And he really liked Lugosi, so he wouldn't have want to put him on the spot.
How about Jack Pierce, though?
Jack Pierce. I think Karloff really liked Jack Pierce. I think everything I've read was that he had terrific admiration for him. He thought he was a lovely man, and of course, he figured he was responsible for his big break.
Yeah.
Sure.
That it was the makeup that sold the part in getting Frankenstein, and that if it hadn't been for Pierce being such a genius at what he did, that he wouldn't have gotten the part, and he would have been back where he was. And a working actor, but certainly not a star, certainly not famous.
Now, is it true that I had also heard that Bela actually did a makeup test reel for Frankenstein?
Yeah.
He did, and of course that's a controversy too, because nobody can agree on what the makeup was like. Some people say the makeup was like the Golem. Other people say Robert Florey, who directed the test, swore that the makeup was the same makeup that Karloff wore eventually.
But I guess it didn't go well, or they weren't impressed with it?
No, well, they weren't impressed, and I think Lugosi was very unhappy doing it. He made a lot of protestations about it, and he said, I was a star in my country. I won't be a scarecrow over here. And the interesting thing is that really in Lugosi's favor, the original script for Frankenstein, before Whale revamped it and everything, the monster really didn't have much personality. He really was basically just this rampaging monstrosity, and there wasn't a whole lot there for an actor to work on. And for someone like Lugosi, who had played Shakespeare and all these classical roles,
Jesus.
and Dracula, he figured, why are they going to waste me in doing something like that, which was a part that he felt any extra could do. Anybody can moan and grunt, as he had expressed it to Lillian. He said, anybody can moan and grunt. Why are they going to waste me in that? So he didn't really see the way the film was going to develop, the way the monster role was going to develop. And so I don't think it was really foolish of him to turn it down. I think it's just that the way it was presented to him at that time, he thought, I don't think so.
Well, when you look at some of the pre-production artwork, some of the concept artwork for the monster, some of those designs are like, are you kidding? Like one of them looks like the Tin Man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's thinking, who wants to do that? I mean, and of course he's getting all this mail at the time after doing Dracula about how sexy he is, and what a terrific actor he is, and he's like, why do I want to shoot myself in the foot by doing a part like this? So it made perfect sense. If someone had, and in fact Lillian said this to me when I talked to her, she said, if an agent had sat down with Bela and said, look, right now you're the #1 star in horror, you don't want to launch your own competition. And of course, in addition to that, maybe once he got involved in the film, he could have, put some other ideas in. We should do this. We should do that. We should try to humanize the role more, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it would have happened that he could have stayed in. But it was it sort of was a train wreck that summer with the way things went, and he was taken off the project. And just as you said, Whale thought Karloff had exactly the right face for what he was looking for. Right. And in addition to that, what Karloff had, which was so great, were his eyes. His eyes were incredible. He had these beautiful eyes, and it always freaks me out watching the movie when he comes in backwards and he turns around and he looks in the camera like that, and you see the makeup. You think, my God, they gave him Greta Garbo's eyes.
Whoa. Is that what you think?
That's
what kind of a sick expert are you?
Hey, that's why he wanted to be alone.
Look, when I look at it, that is such a haunting look.
It is.
Kind of a scary look. And it's tragic. You feel sorry for this creature, this creation.
Yeah, and those eyes are just begging for you to accept me. Don't run away. Give me a chance.
As much as I love Bela Lugosi, when I see Boris Karloff's performance as the monster, there's a certain vulnerability, and I do think Bela had this wonderful talent, but I'm not sure he could have given it that level of vulnerability.
No, I think that's a very good point. I think that one of the things that James Whale wanted in the film. In a letter he wrote to Colin Clive when Clive came over to play Henry Frankenstein, he said, we want this degree of what he called, quote, insane passion, end quote, for Henry Frankenstein to have. When the film Henry Frankenstein has it, but so does the monster. I mean, it's a very passionate performance that Karloff gives. Everything, the facial expressions, the screaming, the noise.
Yeah, you identify with the monster.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and the scene with the little Maria by the lake, I mean, you know, the sounds he makes. There's kind of like little falsetto sounds and everything he makes, like he's some kind of awful baby.
Right.
It's a absolutely brilliant.
A big baby.
Big baby.
That will kill you for a cookie, as Matt would say, right? Yes.
Still, in all though,
accidentally.
It makes you think, though, if Lugosi had really wanted the role, and if Whale had been forced to cast him, it would have been an interesting movie.
It would just been so different. Yeah,
it would have been different. It still would have been probably a great movie under James Whale.
Probably,
and it probably would have gotten the performance out of Lugosi that he wanted, but it would have been a different,
very
portrayal.
different.
A different spiritual makeup, if you will, of the two actors in the way that they performed, and I think the agony that Karloff put into it, you know, really registered and was such a great thing. And you know, it's funny that as far as that scene we mentioned with Little Maria goes, that years ago I had the great fortune of talking to Marilyn Harris, who played Little Maria, and she said that when she first met Karloff, that of course he was in the monster makeup, and they were afraid that you know she was going to be scared. She loved him at first sight. He was like a clown. She said he was just he was like beautiful. You know,
watch it, Larry.
Okay, and she said I went right up and immediately took his hand, and she said, "Can I ride to the lake with you?" And he said, "Oh, would you, darling?" And she said, "Yes." And she said it was like this magic rapport that they immediately had between the little girl and Karloff, and which is so interesting because Marilyn's mother was absolutely a horror. She was a witch. And they went out.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, they went out.
Ain't it always the way?
You mean like in a classic Showbiz Mom kind of thing?
Oh
like,
yeah,
really?
yeah. And she went out to the lake with them, and they did the first take where Karloff picked her up and threw her into the lake, and the mother screamed, "Throw her in again! Throw her in again! Oh, this is wonderful! Throw her in again!" And so and she had terribly sad stories to tell about how her mother had abused her. But I mean, here was this little girl who in her own home was terrified, of her mother, and but immediately has this rapport with this actor who's made up to look like this sewed together corpse, and no fear of him whatsoever. And as you see by watching the film, that they have this magic together that they strike.
It just goes to show you, too, that real people are far more terrifying than monsters.
Any monster concoction that we think of.
Absolutely.
You know, it's funny, Greg, that you bring up that scene. The first time I saw Frankenstein, that scene happens and they start throwing the flowers in the water, and then they throw all the flowers in, and then the monster kind of leans forward and goes, huh, huh, and then it cuts. As a kid, this is how I saw it. And I didn't know about this other thing. And the story that I heard was it was so horrifying, that scene, to the audiences that they took it out. Is that true?
Yes, they took it. Well, actually, they took it out in the late 30s.
Okay,
that part, the Hays Code, going into the lake. Yeah, the actual shot of her
picks her up and he throws her in.
That part came out like in 1937 or 1938 for a reissue because the production code had gotten much more powerful, and they thought that was too much. And Karloff hated doing it. I mean, he absolutely hated it. He took when he took the role, I think he actually figured somewhere along the line, before they got to that scene, he would talk James Whale out of actually killing the girl. Karloff's idea was, all right, the monster meets Little Maria. They sit down. They play with the flowers. They throw them into the lake. The monster gets up, eventually goes his way. She goes her way. And we see the basic innocence of the monster and the child together. And that will work as the scene. And, of course, he had apparently a big battle with Whale about it when they got there, when they got to the lake. And Karloff said, can't we talk about this? And can we change the script? And Whale, of course, said no. And apparently the crew sided with Karloff. They were really repulsed by this idea of the drowning. But, of course, they did it Whale's way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the famous story came. They came back to the studio that night, and Whale said, we're going to keep working. And he went out on the back lot, and he went to a big hill on the Universal lot. Of course, all those big hills on it. Yeah. They had like a structure up there that was supposed to be the windmill. And he had Karloff run up that hill with Colin Clive on his back, with all the torch-bearing villagers and the bloodhounds chasing him up that hill all night. Take after take after take. And Carlos' back was never the same.
Yeah.
From that point on, and by like the mid-1940s, I mean, he was, for a while, he was actually in a wheelchair because his back never really recovered from that night. So it was a really kind of a horror story inside a horror film with the way the whale treated him because of Carlos' rebellion on that particular episode.
Now, did he have back trouble before the role of Frankenstein?
If it wasn't that significant. It wasn't anything like that. But it was interesting because it was. You know, Karloff married 5 times, which is kind of interesting to think about.
There's your back trouble right there.
So that may have been the cause, but no. But he was married to his 4th wife at the time of Frankenstein. But after he died, his widow in England, who was not married to him at the time of Frankenstein, gave an interview late in her life, and she actually told that story. She said, you know, he was fine until he did Frankenstein, and you know, we never really discussed the movie very much, except for the fact that that's what actually almost broke his back was having to do that.
Wait a minute. Wouldn't this be a great tribute to Boris Karloff? Is posthumously we fix his back?
Yeah, really.
Now,
I know a surgeon.
Now, yes, we do.
Yeah.
We do, Matt. Yes, no, but my understanding is when Karloff kind of moved from England to the United States, he went via Canada, and he actually. There weren't a lot of acting roles, so he worked as like basically a worker.
He did. Yeah, he was a laborer.
You know, he labored, he dug holes, and plastered ceilings. You know, and he got his hands dirty. You know, and that's where I understand that maybe he had some problems with his back, or that's what started
it there. But it was definitely aggravated by that situation with Clive. And yeah, that's right. Wow. He did a lot of hard work. Yeah, James Whale, when he would get angry at him, would call him the truck driver. Yeah, because that's what he had done when he was struggling. Yeah.
And did they have kind of a troubled relationship from the beginning, or was it this rebellion with
like a love-hate thing?
Yeah,
I think it was like a love-hate thing. I think the Whale went into Frankenstein thinking that the two big people to come out of the movie were going to be himself and Colin Clive.
Yeah.
And then, of course, eventually he realized that, you know, the monster was inevitably going to be the center of attention and you know, there was no way to getting around that. But still, I think by the end of the movie, he kind of resented the fact that Karloff had really taken over the show. Just naturally it happened.
Unintentionally. He's doing the role.
He's doing the role that everybody's going to pay the most attention to, and that Whale had directed so beautifully. I mean, so, you know, he really shouldn't have blamed Karloff for it, but they had a not very good relationship on Frankenstein. Of course, later when they did The Old Dark House and when they did Bride of Frankenstein, by that time, Karloff was a star, and of course, by the time they did Bride of Frankenstein, Karloff was one of the founders of the Screen Actors Guild, so nobody was going to mess around with him.
His card, if I remember, his Screen Actors card was 0006. He was like the 6th person, I think.
He was one of the founders.
Yeah.
Right up in the beginning.
I do think that Whale was right about the Maria scene.
Yeah.
Yes, because I think I agree. I think it needed that punch.
Yeah.
I think it needed that. That's the thing that people remember so well. And you know, it's funny that we were talking about this a while ago. That I can remember back when Shock Theater first came on in Baltimore, where I grew up outside of Baltimore. And Frankenstein, of course, was the first film that they showed. This was 1957, all right? I was 6 years old. And so I'm 6 years old and watching television, and they would show the commercial for Frankenstein. It was going to be on that Saturday night, and they would show that scene of the monster with little Maria and reaching for her. And, of course, nobody talked about anything else on the school bus. You know, except, did you see that commercial? And he reaches for that little girl. He's going to throw her in the lake, all right? And everybody was just, it was just a phenomenon. And it's funny because everybody said, well, I'm going to stay up Saturday night and watch it. I'm going to stay up Saturday night and watch it. Well, I think I actually was the only kid at St. John's School whose parents actually allowed him to stay up. 6 years old, I think back and I can hardly believe it.
Good
of course, they stayed up with me. They didn't say, oh, yeah, stay up. You know, tell us in the morning how you liked it.
You're all drinking coffee.
but they said, yeah, okay, we'll stay up and watch it. I think they were amused to see how long I would last. And I didn't last at all. I bailed out as soon as it started. And it's really funny because
he's 6.
That was 6.
He's 6.
And you know what else was really freaky about it was they had a local actor in Baltimore. His name was Richard Dix, D-I-X, like the actor Richard Dix in the 30s and 40s. Great actor. Richard Dix was on every day on Baltimore television in the afternoon, and he played a character called Officer Happy. I know that sounds really weird, but he was Officer Happy. He had an Irish accent, and he showed the Little Rascals. All right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to go back to the Little Rascals and all this, and he would do his brogue and show the Little Rascals. Well, he was Officer Happy Monday through Friday. He was Dr. Lucifer on Saturday night.
Dr.
So this was a hard thing for a 6-year-old kid to take in. That Officer Happy had morphed into Dr. Lucifer.
That's like SCTV. Floyd Robertson becomes Count Floyd.
That's right. That's right.
That is great.
Yeah, and so it was so funny. He was a great actor. I mean, he eventually left television and became a Shakespearean actor, acted all over the world. And many, many, many years later, I actually got to meet him and talk to him about that and tell him
awesome.
about that night and about watching the show. But it was several weeks later that I finally actually saw a whole shock theater entry, and that was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman.
Nice.
And my dad did sit up with me and watch it with me, and my mom was working in the kitchen, and but they stayed up and made sure that I didn't have some kind of emotional collapse, watching watching the film.
Yeah.
But I always think back on that. It's amazing that I'm 6 years old, and your parents. I say, can I please stay up and watch this? And then, what time does it come on? 11:15, and they say, oh well, all right. If you really want to, we'll stay up and watch it with you. And that was pretty lucky.
Hey,
Those are great parents.
Great.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
Getting back to the Maria thing and the hill and stuff. Now, when you said that Whale filmed Karloff and the townspeople going up the hill, some scenes look like it's a set, but they actually shot outside on the lot.
They were actually on the lot. I think with the windmill, what they had was like a little tiny structure up there to represent the windmill, and then they matted in special effects to look like a real with the veins and all that stuff. That was a special effect. But they had like a semi windmill there for certain shots, just to represent it.
My understanding now is that spot where Karloff throws the little girl in, that is actually now private land.
We were there today.
Oh, were you really?
Really?
I saw this great. I saw a great picture, a photograph of Sarah Karloff with the young man who is the son of the woman who played the little girl, and they're at that spot.
At that spot.
Such
awesome.
a great.
Is it private?
It is actually if you go up to Malibu Lake. And you drive through where the clubhouse is, where you can arrange weddings and that sort of thing, and you look right across the bridge there. You can see the lineup. I mean, the whole background looks exactly like it did. The same rock formation and everything.
Monster Party road trip.
Our story will be we're getting married.
And show up.
Okay,
Just go with me.
all right. No, but I have got to go to that spot. We have to have a pilgrimage.
It's beautiful.
You know what you do?
You could throw me in the lake.
Well, I was thinking throw a little doll in or
No,
something.
throw me in the lake.
No,
You have no sense of drama.
There are a lot of ducks, swimming around up there. We were there this morning, but no, we went up and it was it's a lovely spot. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. The area over where they apparently lined up the shot is a private lane, but you can see it perfectly fine.
Right,
I mean, if
right.
you just walk down over the bridge and look out, you think, that's the whole lineup of the hills,
awesome.
and it's just that's where they were in 1931.
One of the things I love is when you find out certain spots around the Hollywood or LA area that you can actually visit. This is where they shot that. And this thing. I mean, I get so excited.
Yeah,
Karloff stood in this spot.
That's right. That's right.
One of the things about the censoring of that shot of him throwing her into the lake is that now they include the shot in almost every version you see.
Right.
And he throws Maria into the lake, and it's terrifying. But when I was growing up, the version that we all saw had him reaching for her and then cut away.
Right.
To me, that was always a lot more terrifying because your imagination can fill in what he's going to do to her.
That's right.
True.
Good. So next time you see her, the dad is bringing her, and she is muddy. She looks like she's.
But
See,
you
the
don't know what
problem,
he did to her,
but the problem with that is that it's making the monster into something that he's not. He's not just this creature that wants to murder her just because he suddenly had an inclination. Right. It was an accident. It was a kid playing with another kid.
It's another thing to throw into the lake.
Right,
Yes,
exactly.
and that's what's so great about that scene. The way Whale envisioned it was that it adds another element of tragedy.
That's right. And I think the cut just made it worse because it did. It left it up to your imagination what he did. And then again, as you said, when you see the father carrying her in and one of her stockings is pulled down and everything, the way he's carrying her, and you think, what did this horrible thing do? Right. So it really backfired on them. The cutting of it.
You know, it's funny. For the longest time, I was hesitant about showing that to my daughter. Because she loves monster films, likes me. And we just watched The Exorcist not too long ago, which is her favorite film.
She's 3.
No. no. She's 13. Okay, come on, cut me a little slack. But I actually sat with her. I mean, first of all, she was, I think, 8. When we got to it, and I was all worried, and she didn't think it was much at all. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess.
Kids are made of stronger stuff.
Apparently so. But I was a good parent. Okay, I was just.
No, you were.
So, Greg, let me ask you. Going back to when Lugosi passed on Frankenstein, is that where the relationship was soiled with him and Universal? Because it seems like down the line, he was never treated that well by Universal.
No, he wasn't.
Was
he
that
really
the start
wasn't.
of it? I mean,
it could have been. I think they may have thought he was a little arrogant that he had passed on this film, and of course it worked out for them because they got Karloff, who was very willing and eager, and worked out very well for them. But I think that they felt at that point they felt that immediately Lugosi was the number 2 horror star.
Yeah, because he often got second.
They had number 1 already.
Yeah, he often got second billed to Karloff. He wasn't paid as much as Karloff.
No, he never. I don't think his salaries ever amounted to more than half of what Karloff received.
Now, another thing that I've heard was that one of the reasons is we talked a little bit about the language. If you think about it, I always thought that Karloff and Lugosi, they were both foreigners, but see, Karloff was from England. They spoke English. Lugosi did not. He was Hungarian. He knew German and he knew all these other languages, but it was such a struggle for him. The best English accent, I guess, is when he's playing Igor,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He has that kind of that craggly voice.
And that's the thing that always surprised me when I'd hear these stories about how Lugosi had this resentment that he wasn't getting all these roles. It wasn't really the language, it was the accent. And it's the accent. If you have that thick of an accent, who are you going to play?
Well, that's exactly it. It's funny. One time I remember when, of course, way before there were videos or DVDs available, and of course we would all tape record movies.
Right. Sure.
I remember my dad found I had a tape recording of The Raven in the basement, and Dad found it at one point. He was marking tapes as to what they were. And he put it on, and he heard Lugosi, and so he put a tape on it, and it said Dracula. All right, because he immediately assumed it was Dracula as soon as he heard him talking, because it was the Dracula voice, it was the Hungarian accent. So I think when most people saw him, not only did they see Lugosi and say, "Oh, well, of course, that's Dracula because we recognize him as his face is sort of Dracula because we recognize the accent and the voice," and so. Not being able to sort of reduce the accent was a problem. Of course, it's interesting to evaluate Lugosi from when he was alive and today when he's being reevaluated, because today that's part of his charm, that he had the great accent and that he was who he was and that sort of thing. Whereas when he was alive, it was probably a problem. In his legacy, it's probably a blessing that it's part of his charm, is this accent that he had.
Did he have a reputation as being difficult to work with?
I don't think so. No, he was I think very charming. He was to most people, everybody. I remember talking to several of the ladies who worked on the Karloff Lugosi movies, and they all had nothing but lovely things to say about both of them. And enjoyed working with him, and thought that he was that he was a real gentleman and perfectly lovely. I don't remember ever speaking to anybody who said that he was difficult.
Okay, now let me throw something out at you, Mr. Expert here. So there's this great movie that is one of my favorite Tim Burton films called Ed Wood.
Oh yeah,
and I love this film. I really do.
Me too.
But there is a scene, there is a moment.
Oh yes,
that I remember hearing Forey Ackerman, who was the editor of Famous Monsters. He liked it, but he had an issue. And it was when this one character comes up to Lugosi, played by Martin Landau, who did a beautiful job.
Beautiful job.
And he says, "Oh, Mr. Lugosi, I'm such a big fan. Can I have your autograph?" "Certainly." And he starts to write his autograph, and he says, "I just loved you as Karloff's sidekick." And he goes, "Sidekick? Fuck you!"
That's right.
That calling me sucker. My God, whatever. And it's a funny moment.
Yeah.
But Forey Ackerman, who knew Lugosi, he said, the thing is it's funny, but Lugosi never used that type of language.
Right.
He was actually a very elegant guy, and he never had that kind of animosity towards Karloff. He never used that type of language. So can you set the record straight, sir?
I would agree absolutely with Forey Ackerman. I think that they both these men were great gentlemen. They were class acts. I think that also even in a situation of the problem as far as Karloff having more success than Lugosi, I think both these men, to a certain extent, realized that so much of success in Hollywood and anything else is luck.
Yeah.
It was luck.
Right.
You never see an interview with Karloff where he says, I was really good in that film, or I was, I'm so glad that I trained for the theater and was able to do this or pulled this off, and wasn't I great in that, whatever. He says, wasn't I lucky? Is what he always said. Yeah. Wasn't I lucky? And he knew so many actors who were not lucky, and Lugosi was one who in some ways was not lucky. A lot of profound ways was not a lucky actor. He's a lucky actor in the sense that he's a legend today, and a beloved legend, and an immortal of the screen, and all the other things we can use to describe him, certainly, and deservedly so. But at the time of his career, he had an awful lot of ups and downs, a lot of bad breaks.
Speaking of the Universal animosity, I think I had read that for Son of Frankenstein, the role of Igor was a much more minor part in the script, and director Roland Lee, he knew Lugosi was playing him. He wanted to give him a bigger part, so he kept him on set more, and he gave him extra lines, and that became one of his best roles.
It did. It was a fantastic performance. Yeah. And I think that film sort of points out something we're talking about here too, and that is that I don't think Karloff had any problem at any point with Lugosi's successes, such as Igor. I mean, you don't. There's no documentation at all, for example, on Son of Frankenstein, that Karloff ever went up to to Roland V. Lee and said, "Look, you're making Lugosi's part too big."
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Or I don't like the fact that I'm spending so much of this film unconscious on an operating table while he's getting to run around and this other stuff. All right. And something's better be done here, or I'm walking out. Never anything like that happening where you have that kind of thing going on that happens all the time with a lot of actors. I mean, you hear it all the time with somebody going on, and people counting the lines. How many lines do I have opposed to this person? All this sort of stuff never happened.
You bring up a really good point. We have talked about how on previous shows how much we loved Igor, and if you think about it, who is Igor? He's this guy who was a criminal and he was hung, and they thought he was dead, and they cut him down, and he survived. And we were thinking about, my God, where's the prequel? Where's the story of Igor? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
We have talked about this before. Wouldn't it have been great if after the success of that they could have done the birth of Igor or something like that, where you would have followed how evil Igor was and what he did to the town, and they actually hung him, and he's and they cut him down eventually, and it's like, he's still alive, because now they can't try him again.
That's right.
They thought he was dead.
Yeah. No,
what a great story.
It would have been a great story. It really would. A prequel to Son of Frankenstein, setting up Igor, his relationship with the Frankenstein family.
Yes.
He could fall between bride and son.
That's right.
That's
right. The grave robbing he did for them.
Yeah, he'd be like the Rogue One of the Universal.
That's right. No, that would have been super, and Lugosi would have loved it because he loved that role. He would have loved doing it. And he is terrific in that movie.
And the fact that he got another shot at it.
That's right. With the Ghost of Frankenstein, in which he's really, really fun in that one as well. Now, he was a marvelous actor.
But alas, it's something that we'll just have to put in our fan fiction.
But wouldn't you think, though, that Universal would go, oh, there are a few more levels to this guy that maybe we didn't see.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think? I mean, and it's interesting that you figure that in after Son of Frankenstein, that you look to see what Universal gave him. And, for example, The Wolfman, in which he has that very small role as the gypsy. Great role, great performance, but a very small one. And
the character's name is Bela.
Yeah. I mean,
talk about lazy writing.
Take that, Kurt Siodmak.
Yeah, that's right. But no, they really should have said, wow, well, look, he can do this. Let's give him something like that to do. But no, and again, I think it was just it was bad luck. There wasn't somebody in there to pitch for him to say, look how good this guy is. And it's a sad story, and that is that about the time after Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, which of course his monster performance is a whole other legendary story. Apparently, he talked to a director named Ford Beebe, and he said they were neighbors. And he talked to Ford Beebe, and he said, I'm starting to think I've become passé. I'm wondering how much I have to offer anymore. And isn't it sad that somebody with that much talent and that much ability and that all those things would have to be made to feel that way because the industry just simply wasn't treating him with the right respect.
Right.
And of course, after a while, I guess, he comes to think, well, maybe it's me.
Right.
Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe it's not just that, I'm getting lost in the shuffle here because of the studio just doesn't have the brains to capitalize on what I have to offer.
Right.
Maybe I'm really doing something. So apparently he really did start to think maybe I've outlasted my usefulness.
Showbiz
tough business
can screw with your head.
Yeah. And he was a very sensitive man.
If you look at their filmographies too, like I realized when I looked at their films, Lugosi did a lot of of the cheap Monogram and PRC, the Poverty Row films, but I didn't realize that he did those pretty early on. Like he was doing those almost right around the same time as he was doing the Wolfman, the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
That's right.
Like whereas Karloff did do a small amount of Monogram films. He played Mr. Wong. It was like a poor man's Charlie Chan.
That's right.
But like only in like 3 or 4 films. But Lugosi did a lot of Poverty Row stuff.
He did.
But like early on, like I used to think, oh, well, he did those later after all the Universal. But no, he was kind of doing those on the same time.
At the same time. And, it's interesting, you wonder what would have happened with Karloff, but he was saved, of course, that at the time that Lugosi was really getting into Monogram in later on in the early 1940s, that's when Arsenic and Old Lace came along for Karloff.
Oh, right.
Oh, so tell us about
which Karloff was terrified to do because it's interesting. Karloff he loved acting. He passionately loved acting, but he never really thought he was a great actor, and he always had stage fright.
So this is the play. This is the play.
And he always felt in his head he had no right to be in a play in New York City. He had no right to be a Broadway actor.
Interesting.
And so when they came to him on Arsenic and Old Lace, and Russell Crouse came out and talked to him, Russell Crouse, one of the producers, came out and talked to him in Hollywood about doing the play. He said, "We would like you to do a play in New York." Carl said, "No, I won't do a play in New York. I'm not, I'm not that kind of actor. It would be incredibly presumptuous of me to even try." And Krauss explained to him, the plot of the story, and that you play this killer transformed by a drunken plastic surgeon to look like Boris Karloff. And then Karloff laughed and said, "Well, maybe, all right." That's great. All right. But, he as he said himself, before that show opened in New York, he walked through the streets of New York all night one night trying to think of a graceful way to quit. No. Because he was so terrified of going on before a New York audience that he just didn't think he could do it. Wow. And he gave a very funny and somewhat atypical quote about it later. Somebody actually came to him and said, "Well, what do you remember about opening night, Mr. Karloff?" And he said, "I'll tell you all that I can remember about the first 3 weeks of the play." He said, "Opening night, my cue came and somebody gave me a little push on stage." He said, "All I remember after that is that I had diarrhea for 3 weeks."
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
So he was,
it's again that commissary.
But you see pictures of him from that play, and he's gaunt. I mean, he was sick. He was terrified. He couldn't eat. He was just he was just a wreck of thinking of doing that. Now I have to say that I think if somebody had offered the part to Lugosi, he would have said, sure, piece of cake.
Coming from having done Dracula.
No problem. And of course, he ended up doing Arsenic and Old Lace in touring companies and that sort of thing. But so a very different thing in their psyche in that regard was the fact that. Not that Lugosi was an egotist, I don't think he was, but I think that he had a little more of a comfort level with that sort of thing than Karloff did. And Karloff and confidence. And I think Karloff he thought, "Oh, I just love acting. I wouldn't want to do anything else. But boy, am I terrified to do it, But I have to do it because I won't be happy unless I do it.
Now, when he did Arsenic and Old Lace, did he have like a piece of it somehow? Or
he did. The producers really liked him. That was Howard Lindsay and Russell Crouse, who had produced Life with Father, which was this enormous Broadway success. So they were really rolling in money. They did Arsenic and Old Lace, and they said to Karloff, "Would you like to invest in it?" And Karloff said, "Oh, no. Maybe for one thing, he figured with him in it wouldn't last very long anyway." So, but they came to him opening night after the show was this incredible smash, and the audience screamed and cheered and carried on, and Karloff and the two old ladies stood on stage and cried, with this reception going on. And they had a party afterwards, and Howard Lindsay and Russell Crouse walked up and said, "So, Boris, what about that 10% we offered you earlier in the play?" And Carlos said, "Well, who eventually got it?" He said, "Well, we held it out for you."
Oh, no. Wow.
You still want it? Yeah. So he became a very, very wealthy man from that show alone. I mean, because that was one of the historic hits of the American theater. It ran for a long time.
So
and touring companies.
Even after he did it and it was done by other people, he always got a little piece of it.
He did. I mean, if a high school did the play, and spent say $50 for the rights to do it 2 times on a weekend, some of that $50 went to Karloff. Wow. Because he was one of the original investors, so he was set for life after that.
And that was the kind of thing that Bela Lugosi never got any kind of like nice lucrative deal like that, right?
No, and it's funny because later Lugosi took over in the road company. Arsenic and Old Lace, and so in effect, he was actually working for Karloff.
That's true. Yeah,
in a sense,
he was doing the play.
Yeah,
Karloff was still getting.
He was still getting the money. So,
wow, that's so ironic.
So no matter who did it, Karloff got the money, or some of the money. So so it translated into good work for both of them, and it's certainly a fortune for Karloff. Yeah,
and talk about showing off his ability to do comedy.
Yeah. He had incredible timing, which so many of the great actors do. There's great comic timing. Even playing a series, a role which wasn't the funny role in the show. Still, the timing he had to use.
The timing, yes,
with the other actors.
He's a funny straight man.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Now we're talking a lot about the play. Now there was a movie that was made, and that doesn't have Boris Karloff in it.
No, it has Raymond Massey because Warner Brothers made the film. And what happened was that Lindsay and Krause knew this because they were very experienced theater men. They figured that if they let Karloff leave the play, because it was filmed in late 1941, it wasn't released until 1944 after the play closed, but they filmed it in late 1941. They figured if they let Karloff go to Hollywood for 6 or 8 weeks to make the film, the slump in the box office would be so bad the play would never get back on its feet. And so Karloff agreed to stay. I mean, he was heartbroken he couldn't do the movie, but at the same time, I mean, he was making a fortune with the play, and so he had his compensations. So he stayed with the show while Josephine Hull and Gina Dare and John Alexander, who played Teddy, those three went out to
Hollywood to do the movie.
And we were mentioning earlier about the Raymond Massey and everybody in the film, and that was that years ago, writing about the play, I checked with Warner Brothers to see if they could find anything about Karloff's involvement in the film from the point of view of them using his name and using his face, because Raymond Massey is made up to look like Karloff.
And there's the famous line in the play when they look at the criminal and say,
he said, "I look like Boris Karloff," and it's not meant as a compliment. So sure enough, the fellow at Warner Brothers, God bless him, found a report that the lawyers had filed at Warner Brothers and saying that yes, that if Karloff wanted to, he could actually sue for likeness. He could sue because of unfair competition. He could sue because of the insult that he's being paid in the in the play. All this sort of thing, and that to cover themselves, they really should go see Karloff at the theater where he's performing Arsenic and Old Lace and get him to sign a release, which apparently Karloff did. And of course, it was totally to his advantage. I mean, because of the fact that the play was so successful, and the movie turned out to be an enormous hit as well. So he was rolling in money with that play. So, and of course, he was always a good sport anyway. So he wasn't going to have a problem with that.
And would they change that line every time that they got a new person to play?
They
that
did,
role?
And the very first person actually to do it after Karloff, only a few months later, in a Chicago company of the play, was Erich von Stroheim.
No!
Really? Wow.
And of course he said, I killed him because he said I look like Erich von Stroheim. And the audience went nuts. They loved it.
Keep changing it.
That's right. That's right.
I killed him because he said I looked like Buddy Hackett.
Wow. Okay, so I want to talk about. We've talked about the two men separately, but they're the great pairings in their heyday of the films they did together.
Oh yeah.
So the first, I believe, the first one where Lugosi and Karloff starred together was The Black Cat in 1934.
Cool.
Marvelous film.
Fantastic movie.
Very stylized.
Very stylized. And
everything about it's just gorgeous.
And very creepy and
it is
sadistic.
It's a nasty movie.
And, very odd plot.
Very, 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 and
ahead of its time.
Yes,
very ahead of its time, and very interesting characterizations for them. I mean, Karloff is supposed to be, according to the script, the earthly incarnation of Satan. He's the devil himself.
No, Matt.
And Lugosi
of us.
And Lugosi is the avenging angel who comes to kill him, and not only kills him, skins him alive.
Skins him alive.
That's right.
And what's funny is James had mentioned this thing about Frankenstein where they do this cut, and in this film it's a silhouette.
Yeah,
and Karloff is you can see he's tied up, and you see his body movies.
It's on the rack.
And
Just
James,
brutal.
James, I remember
Really
watching
is.
this as a kid, and I almost vomited.
No, you
I
didn't.
did.
No, you
I did.
didn't.
What? How do you? Were you there? Were you there?
No, I'm just shocked.
No, I was watching it, and
Yeah,
I
it's
saw
toughing
that,
you
I went, yeah.
Wow.
No, it is gruesome. And,
No,
and
it's
in fact,
great.
what you said, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, what I said.
It is a really gruesome movie, and that Skinning Alive is unbelievable. And it's funny. Variety reviewed the movie, and they talked about the Skinning Alive, and he said they thought the Skinning Alive was dubious showmanship. The way they put
But also,
it.
you have these beautiful women in the glass
That's right.
case.
That's
you know,
right.
kind of a thing. They're not really in a glass case thing.
They're like in caskets,
Yeah.
glass caskets, that are standing vertically. Yeah, that's right. He's got a whole beauty parade of them down there in the basement of these virgins that apparently he sacrificed.
You need a hobby.
And Larry, you must have loved that sequence because all those women were like mint and packaged.
Oh yeah.
See, I like to take them out and play with them. I'm so sorry.
Yes, but they'd be damaged.
Well.
Yeah, I'd have them.
Couple broken ribs.
No, I'd have them pristine. Okay.
Okay.
No, but this.
But it's a great pairing of those two
It is,
stars.
and they're very evenly matched in the film.
Yes, yes.
They have the same amount of footage, they have their own styles as the way they play the roles.
Right, right.
Beautiful partnership, great screen chemistry and alchemy. They absolutely, they really ring the bell on that. Yeah.
Now, my understanding is this film that we're talking about. There's a famous rock star who's a huge fan of this.
True.
Kirk Hammett.
Yes.
And from Metallica, and he was so obsessed with this movie that he actually owns the original costumes worn by Lugosi and Karloff.
Oh,
and he
really?
has mannequins made exactly like Karloff and Lugosi at his house.
Oh, my
And there's
goodness.
this great book that you can get that shows Kirk Hammett's collection. And
Too
they
much
are-
horror business.
Yes, and it's fantastic.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to check that out. Yeah,
Yes.
I did some work, some freelance work for Heritage for a while. And I was there when they auctioned off the Karloff costume, and it was amazing to see and think, wow.
Yeah, that
There it is.
was Kirk Hammett bidding on that. Some of us here at this table have been outbid by
Yeah.
Kirk Hammett.
I
on
can
several
imagine.
occasions.
I won the Virgin case. A lot of Windex.
So then, of course, the next year was followed by The Raven.
The Raven.
Another kind of good pairing of the two.
It is. It's a really fun movie to watch.
It's different, though.
Yeah, very different.
But it's interesting to see, like, it's another one though, where like Lugosi is like using Karloff.
Yes.
Karloff is like the victim to Lugosi. You know.
The roles have changed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting, and it's interesting that Karloff was originally set for Lugosi's role in that movie. He was supposed to play the plastic surgeon,
Oh, really?
which of course was the very dominant part in the script.
Right.
But it's not really clear exactly what happened. But apparently Karloff figured that Lugosi would be better for the part, and plus Karloff wasn't really that wild about the script anyway. I think he kind of figured, well, Bela can have this one. Yeah,
Right.
I'll take the other part because he, Karloff later said, the Raven was nothing but a bloody stuffed bird on Bela Lugosi's desk. Nothing to do with
tenuous
Poe.
connection.
Yeah, very.
Now, Sean, there's a famous advertising clip of Karloff and Lugosi, and they're playing a game of chess.
Right.
Do you remember this?
Yeah. Is that no? What was
That's
that
what
for?
I'm trying to remember, because what happens is you see Karloff and Lugosi, and they're both in like three-piece suits, kind of, and he says, "Are you ready, Frankenstein?" "Yes, Dracula."
Yeah.
And then they pull back and they're playing chess,
I
and
thought
they
it was
kind
like
of have a
for
laugh.
war bonds or something, or it was like
Well, actually, what it was 1934. It was right very shortly after the Black Cat. And they actually made that because they were both Screen Actors Guild members. The Screen Actors Guild put on a thing called the Film Stars Frolic. They had it at Los Angeles.
right.
Gilmore. Is there still a Gilmore Stadium in Los Angeles, or is that long gone?
Anybody?
I don't know.
No.
Anyone?
It was a place,
Anyone?
Los Angeles Gilmore Stadium, and all these great stars came to Gilmore Stadium for a weekend and did all kinds of stuff. And I'm not sure what Karloff and Lugosi did, but I mean, they were there for, signing autographs and putting on shows. And they had a parade every night and all this. And so they did this little film clip for Columbia Pictures in which they're, as you said, they're playing chess and competing supposedly to see who's going to lead the parade at the Film Stars Frolic. And, it's amazing to think that the Film Stars Frolic was an incredible bust. Nobody went. And the Screen Actors Guild lost all their money.
Really?
And as they said, the public frolicked elsewhere. They did not come. You think? I mean, of course, we all would agree that if Karloff and Lugosi were there that weekend, we'd be there, right? To cheer them on. But no, they had all these great stars, and to raise money for the Screen Actors Guild, and it bombed out. And almost was the end of the Screen Actors Guild. So, but that was what that film was in connection to. That was a plug for the Film Stars Frolic.
So the idea of like the pairing of these two had kind of solidified now, right? I mean, the idea of like this, the two big masters of horror.
Yeah, I'm sure when that came up on the screen, in the theaters, and the people saw this, look, there's Boris. Oh, look, oh, how about that? Look, they're back together again. Here.
Right. And then it's like a little bit of like, see, we're really just actors. We're actually friends.
That's right. We chuckle and break up and laugh, and we're playing chess and having fun, and nice to see them, chuckling with each other and having a good time.
Right.
Now, maybe you could fill me in on a. I've always wondered this in the movie House of Frankenstein. I love House of Frankenstein. I really do. But you have Karloff in it playing kind of a mad scientist in a way.
Yes.
And there is a vampire. Actually, it's not it's a Dracula. It is Dracula. And it's played by...
It's Dracula.
Yes.
It's not a Dracula.
Yes. It's Demon
like
Boots.
from the,
okay.
All right.
Big
pack of Draculas.
Yeah. Okay. Very funny. Very funny. But you have John Carradine play Dracula. And I thought, why couldn't they have gotten Lugosi? It would have been another opportunity to pair these two guys.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I wasn't sure. Is this where Lugosi had some of his issues?
Well, what really probably happened with that was, it was funny, we were talking a little while ago about Lugosi taking over an Arsenic and Old Lace on the road. He was still in the play on tour at the time that they put the production together for House of Frankenstein. So and also, of course, at that point, John Carradine was also at Universal, and they were building him as a horror star with Carradine. But I think that probably what happened was they thought, well, will Lugosi be back in time or not? Well, we don't know. Well, let's go with Carradine. We're building him up anyway.
Right.
But yeah, it would have been very interesting to see Karloff and Lugosi together in that film, and to see Lugosi as Dracula again.
To see Karloff pull the stake out of Dracula, Lugosi's heart would have been great. But that's me. That's me.
But kind of a metaphor,
That's right. That's right.
That's true, because you never actually. That would have been the only time they would have played their iconic roles together in a movie.
Well, Karloff isn't the monster.
No, but I'm saying, I'm saying you're right. That never happened. You never got to see. Karloff played Frankenstein.
Right.
Lugosi played Dracula, and then Lugosi played Frankenstein. But they never got to be together as the Frankenstein monster and Dracula.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
We're all big fans of Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and we've talked about what makes the film so great is how the horror is played straight in that film.
Right.
Yeah.
But can you imagine what it would have been like if you have Bela Lugosi playing Dracula, not a Dracula.
Which he does, yes.
But wouldn't it have been cool if you had Frankenstein playing the Frankenstein monster?
But now, would it? Because I wonder if by that time he's older.
Yeah, and Glenn Strange made a great Frankenstein.
Heart's maybe not quite as much into it. I wonder if it would have come off a little sad.
Also, the other thing is, in Son of Frankenstein, when you look at Karloff, life's been good to him. He's put on some weight. The monster's got a little hefty there. He doesn't have that gaunt face. So by this time, he would have been, Weight Watcher. I would have been a hefty Frankenstein. Maybe
Red, good.
Well, there's also not that much for the Frankenstein monster to do in Abbott and
That's
Costello.
true.
He would have been wasted in that.
But now,
I agree completely.
I heard though that Lugosi wasn't even offered the Dracula role right away.
Not originally, no. They had Ian Keith down to do it, who was one of the contenders back in 1930 that they were going to use. And then they eventually got smart and decided to get Lugosi. But it really is bizarre that it was so hard for Lugosi to get a break, even an obvious break. You think like that. I mean,
and how good he is, and how good he looks.
He's so good in it. Yeah,
he looks great.
He looks great.
Terrific.
And it's a little different interpretation than what he does in a 1931 film, because at this point he is more comfortable in English, and of course the lines are written more offhandedly than they are in Dracula. They don't have the same stiffness that they have in Dracula. But no, he is superb in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
One of the things
just terrific.
I love about Bela in that movie is he seems to be kind of enjoying himself. He's along for the ride.
You can see the twinkle in his eye. Yeah. He's having a good time and really having fun. And that was one of the real pleasures of doing the original It's Alive book, was talking to Charlie Barton, who directed Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and who was a super nice man, really, really nice guy, and he had such, he had such wonderful memories of making that movie, and it had such great things to say about Lugosi and Glenn Strange and Lon Chaney Jr. And he said, making that movie, the real monsters for Abbott and Costello.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Well, I'd heard though that I had heard that they just, for them, it was just one of their other movies. I mean, they were churning their films out, and this was just another one. I mean,
I don't think they realized what they, I mean, they worked very hard on it, but I don't think they realized at the time this was going to be what it was.
Right.
And apparently, Lou Costello took the position early on that this was not going to work. This was a bad idea. Wow. And then when it turned out to be such a hit, he was kind of angry that he was proven wrong. I mean,
making some people happy.
That's right. So he started saying, "Oh, God, I'm so glad that I was wrong about it. It's going to be a hit." He was kind of like, "Nope, I still don't like it." So, but it
was just the alchemy
terrific.
of that is just perfect.
It is. Everything works in that movie, and Glenn Strange is a very impressive monster. He really is. I mean, he's big and he's strong, and you believe he can tear that gate down, and he's there.
Did Bela get any more money for this one?
He got, I actually saw his contract for it. He got about $2,000 a week, and I think he had about a 4 or 5 week guarantee. So, yeah, he was making about $8,000 or $10,000 on Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
At the original Dracula, that's not too bad.
Yeah, the original Dracula, he got about $3,500.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also want to mention The Invisible Ray, which is a great film, too. That's like a true science fiction movie, too.
It is. It is.
And a great, unique film, and another good pairing.
Yes.
I really kind of Bela's is kind of a good guy. We're not
kind of a good guy.
I mean,
very rigid good guy, but a good guy. And I think Carl's performance is one of his most interesting performances in Invisible Ray, because he's a mad scientist, but he's like a mama's boy. I mean, he's a real misfit all the way through the film. And when he gets Radium X, he's just even more of a misfit. He already was messed up. Now he's really messed up. And he kind of overacts, and which is fine. And he's
that hair
and that curly hair.
Yeah, it's strange.
And at one scene, he goes up to his mother if he cures her blindness, and he puts his curly hair down in her, his head down in her lap, and she strokes his hair and everything. And it's really different. It's a really different character. Very, very unusual. And I think that's I think it's a really cool performance, and I think it's kind of underrated. I think it's a very unusual approach he takes to that role, and has a lot of fun with it. And of course, the great ending when he tries to he wants to kill Frances Drake, his wife, and he can't do it. He stands there and he's wanting to touch her with the Radium X hand, but he can't do it, and it's really neat. But incidentally, Frances Drake, who was in that film, was a lovely lady in a great interview, and she loved both of them. She thought Karloff and Lugosi were both terrific. She thought, and she had the impression they were both very good friends.
Greg, were they friendly? Did they socialize?
No. Now, when I say they didn't socialize, that doesn't mean they weren't friendly. I mean, they were friendly to each other when they worked.
Right.
They were very classy guys, and they so they basically got along. There was a little trouble in the first film with the Black Cat because they were getting used to each other and that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But eventually, they became very good friends. Very good friends on the set, but not very good friends away from the set.
Yeah, when people get together to work on things together,
professionals.
Like
that's right. So I
understand, Larry.
But no, they were always amiable together when they worked there. I don't think there was ever any clash or problem or
animosity,
screaming match.
Right,
It wasn't a Betty Davis, Miriam Hopkins kind of situation. They were always gentlemen and respected each other, and nothing like the aforementioned Ed Wood situation going on.
That was artistic license.
That was great artistic license.
A fun movie,
and that scene does work very well. And Martin Landau plays it beautifully. Again, his timing and everything on that is great, but. Lugosi would not have talked like that, and it was funny because somebody else who went on record about that was Lugosi's last wife, Hope, who went to see it, and she said Bela never ever said a small damn in front of me. She said she never heard him curse.
Right.
She said, at that point in his life, he certainly wasn't a great fan of Karloff, but of course at that point this was the last year of his life. He had gone through a lot of terrible things. And it would be kind of unusual if he didn't somehow envy, or resent to a certain extent how successful Karloff had become, since they were pretty much on the same level, at one point, and that he would have resented his luck or good fortune. But no, that's a very popular question, and No, they treated each other a lot better than some of their respective fans treat each other today.
Larry.
Well, I was going to say, you know what he's talking about, right?
Yeah. You know, they would have never gotten into some of those situations that you see.
No, because they were classy people.
That's right. That's right.
I think some of Karloff's best work was in the 40s was the trio of Val Lewton films.
Oh, sure.
that he
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Bedlam, Isle of the Dead, and The Body Snatcher, which I believe was the last time that Lugosi and Karloff were paired together.
That's right. That was their 8th and final film. And Karloff, of course, had a big contract at RKO for the Val Lewton films and was doing very well. And The Body Snatcher was, of course, actually built for Karloff.
Right.
You know, it was when Karloff signed the contract, then Val Lewton said, what we're going to do is try to develop proper story material to showcase him properly. And so these films basically came into being because of Karloff.
Wow.
In that case, in that film, there's a recurrent rumor you hear sometimes about the fact that Lugosi was originally supposed to play Dr. Macfarlane, but that's not true. He
Is that
was
the
never
Henry
considered.
Daniels
Henry Daniels part
that
yeah.
went to? Okay.
Yeah, but Lugosi was never considered for that role, according to the RKO paperwork. They had a whole list of names of people they considered for it, but Lugosi's name was not on it. And Robert Wise later said that basically it was the studio's idea to put Lugosi in the film, just for billing purposes and to kind of, appeal to the horror crowd and to make this look like a very special type of horror film that had both of them in it.
Right.
Lugosi had his problems on the picture. He was, as Wise has said, he wasn't really very sharp. He was having some problems getting the characterization. But I think his major problem was that he was really kind of sensitive about what had happened. I mean, here was Karloff having this terrific role as a body snatcher. And Lugosi is kind of brought in as a stooge almost for him in it. And I think that it was perfectly understandable that he felt badly about it, and he had a little hard time getting himself psyched up. But eventually he did, and that scene is dynamite. The two of them together in that scene is fantastic.
It's telling.
Yeah.
It's kind of a symbolic moment because it's like Karloff's character kind of suffocating him.
Yeah.
And like almost like that's the last moment of
right.
Karloff's big career in a way.
Yeah,
It's like,
and I think Lugosi might have sensed that exactly thing happening. That this was a little bit too much, too much like real life, and it bothered him. But he was. Lugosi was very good in that picture. Karloff was superb. It's a funny story about The Body Snatcher, and that is that my dad, when that movie first came on television, again back when I was a very little kid, I said, "Can we stay up and watch it?" And he said, "The Body Snatcher." He said, "A friend of mine was on the set of that picture when we were stationed in Los Angeles before we went overseas in World War II." And I said, "Oh, did you see Boris Karloff?" My father went, "Yeah." I said, "What did he say?" He said, "I'll tell you sometime." Oh, boy. Wow. So I thought, okay. So I actually remembered that years later. I said,
Dear diary.
I said, "Hey, Dad, you told me your friend Mickey was on the set of The Body Snatcher." My father would laugh. Yeah. I thought, "Oh, boy, it's going to be good." I said, "Well, what?" And he saw Boris Karloff. He said, "Yeah." I said, "What did he remember that Boris Karloff did? What did he see him do that day?" And he said, "Well, what happened was that there's a scene where Karloff comes in carrying a body over his shoulder. And he walks in and throws it down on the table, and he says to Russell Wade, "Hey, give me a hand, will you? This is heavy." Is actually what he says, and that's when he throws it down on the thing. He says, "Well, give me a hand with you. This is heavy," and he lug it in, and throw it down on the table. So when they shot the scene, they had brought these soldiers on the set. We were giving them a tour of RKO, and they brought them on and said, "You're going to see a scene being filmed for The Body Snatcher, starring Boris Karloff." And I was going, Boris Karloff, all right. And they're going to be very quiet and watch. This is a very moody scene in this horror film, and all this, and watch it very carefully. So they're all lined up there watching, and the door opens, and action. And Karloff comes in with the body over his shoulder, and goes up to Russell Wade and turns around to him, and he says, "Give me a hand with this, will you? This goddamn thing's heavy." So the soldiers hit the floor, because nobody said damn, much less goddamn in the movies in those days. And of course, Karloff did it to get give the soldiers a good laugh. So they said, yeah, they all went back to camp that night. So what you see in Hollywood? Oh, I went to the Hollywood Canteen, and what you see? Oh, we went to RKO. We heard Boris Karloff say, "God damn it." It was really cool.
That's awesome.
Where's that outtake?
Yeah, really.
That's right.
Wow.
I would say that of the Lewton films, probably my favorite one is Bedlam.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
One.
That is a great movie. That is a great movie, and he's wonderful in it, and it's a great pioneering female story. Anna Lee, is very very great, strong female performance in that. It's a really good movie, and it came out at a time that RKO wasn't really pushing the Luton films anymore, and it didn't get the respect it deserved at the time. But I love Bedlam too. I think
it's funny you should like that one, because I thought The Lost Patrol.
That's good.
Would be, because it's so, to me, it was so unlike a character that he would play. It was dark, it was foreboding, but it wasn't quite like an evil guy, Well,
what was great about Bedlam, I thought, and what Boris Karloff did, is it's the kind of evil that is seductive. There was a certain charm about him.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Right.
That anytime he said anything, I was just mesmerized. I could not get enough.
Right.
Yeah, he is very, very cool in that movie, and it's a great performance and a great movie.
The overall picture is wonderful, and the fact that it's, in a lot of ways, it's not really a horror film at all.
No, it's a historical film.
Yeah, and it's very uplifting.
Yeah, it is. A very inspiring movie, and he's great. And of course, that great death scene where they wall him up, and he suddenly wakes up and they're putting the last brick into the thing, and he's buried alive. Yeah.
I think that's how I'm going. I have a feeling.
Yes, but when you go, you're going to have your entire collection buried with you, if I remember correctly.
And a whole bunch of sandwiches, hopefully, and a very large bucket.
So as the 1950s came, Karloff made a few horror films in the 50s, not probably his most notable ones, but he did, Corridors of Blood and Frankenstein 1970, which is really fun.
I enjoy
ridiculous.
That movie. It's ridiculous, but it is fun.
The Haunted Strangler. And Lugosi had made a couple too. He was kind of doing some comedies too. Then he was doing, of course, Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn Gorilla, Mother Riley meets the Vampire. But then I guess is this kind of when his health was really taking its toll? I mean,
it was, sadly. Yeah, he was becoming ill, and again, maybe I think what Karloff said early on about him not being comfortable in the English language, this might have come into play at this point, that he really wasn't well advised as far as the best way to seek help for his physical problems, and that he accidentally became addicted to drugs, and that eventually had to, actually self-commit himself.
Yes, but to clarify, it's not like he went out like some party people here who go, "Hey, I want to try cocaine." No. This was a guy who he was suffering. Remember, I had mentioned early on that he had been wounded in the war.
That's right.
And his body had taken its toll, and he was in a lot of pain.
That's right.
And so it was actually these painkillers.
It was a medicinal thing. Absolutely.
And this, this is something that people suffer from today, where you get
an epidemic.
Yeah, you get addicted to painkillers.
Yes.
And then it moved to like methadone.
That's right.
And so in a way, it wasn't like, hey, I want to get high. It was more like, I want to try to get rid of this pain.
Absolutely.
I just want to be clear about this.
It was absolute. No, that's an excellent point. He was trying very hard to get well. Unfortunately, the wrong things were happening, and he was becoming sicker. And he wanted to keep working. He had a very, very Protestant work ethic type of attitude towards work. He wanted to keep working all the time. Took anything that would come along, basically, because as long as it was honest work, he wanted to keep going. And he figured the drugs would help him do that. And of course, unfortunately, they did not. And what he did was really a very brave thing to be able to withstand that kind of publicity at a time when this was a very, very unheard of thing.
Yes.
Wasn't
Today it
he
would
like
be nothing
the first
to it.
one?
Yes.
He very well may have been one of the very first ones.
Right?
Yes.
When he got out, he was talking about he was
this is
out and ready to work
This
again.
is a very powerful scene in the movie Ed Wood, which is based on, the way it was shot and what he was wearing. There are photos of Bela Lugosi at that time when this actually happened, and they stayed so close to it.
Yes.
And they actually had newspaper reporters come in, and it's like, oh my gosh, big star, doing drug rehab. It was a big deal.
Absolutely. And again, this ties into something we were saying a little earlier when we talked about Karloff's responses about him not knowing the language very well. And that was that Karloff, of course, knew the things that Lugosi had been through. He knew about the financial problems. He certainly knew about the drug addiction. Everybody knew. It was so garishly publicized. You never, ever, ever heard Karloff say, yes, wasn't it a shame that he was addicted to drugs? Or wasn't it a shame that he had an alcohol problem? Or wasn't it a shame that he hadn't handled his money well? What he would say, since everybody knew that Lugosi had basically gone down in flames, I mean, it was a very, very sad end. And there was no way to get around that. I mean, if somebody came around and said, wasn't it tragic about Bela Lugosi to Karloff? Karloff couldn't very well say, well, what do you mean? You know, what do you mean tragic? You know, I mean, I don't know what you're referring to. And so what he would normally say, or almost always say, he said, well, isn't it a shame the man didn't learn the language better? Because he probably would have had more opportunities if he knew the language better. That way, he actually addressed the problem without getting into the more sticky areas.
Sure.
And so I think that might be why that became his response, was that, well, he probably would have done better if he understood the language better and developed a better English, rather than say, well, yes, well, you know, that was only one of his problems. Of course, he also, you know, this was one, and this was one, and this was one. And he wouldn't go there. He never went there. All the people who went to Karloff in late years and said, you know, let's talk about Bela Lugosi, he would always say very flattering things. And of course, he couldn't just be a Pollyanna about it. He had to say, obviously, there was something went wrong along the way. And I think he realized that saying what went wrong along the way was the fact that he didn't become as proficient in English as he might have, was the most discreet thing to say, rather than say, well, isn't it a shame that he had this medical mistake? Isn't it a shame that he ended up having to commit himself? Isn't it a shame? You know, never went there.
And I wonder, too, if the language thing even had a bit of a factor in the fact that, you know, Lugosi didn't seem to take advantage of television the way Karloff did.
No.
Like and Karloff, you know, early on.
Yeah. And of course, he didn't have the agent representation that Karloff had, you know, which was a big part of it. He didn't have the somebody in there pitching for him and getting him the jobs. And, you know, it's interesting that for years the story went around about Lugosi being on the Red Skelton show. And it was circulated by people who actually saw the show at the time, that the appearance was basically a disaster. And in fact, they sort of dramatized that in the movie Ed Wood. They didn't call the comic Red Skelton. But you saw Lugosi on a show with a comedian in which he, you know, loused up his lines, and they had to terminate
Bobby Slayton, friend of the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's done our show a few times.
Yeah, it's a very effective scene. And it breaks your heart to see Lugosi in that situation.
It's true.
But, you know, since then, this Red Skelton show has emerged, and he's great on it. He is great on it. And there's one point at the end where Red Skelton whispers something to him. You can imagine what it must have been. All right. And Lugosi kind of goes, huh? Like this. And the audience roars with laughter, where he's obviously a little bit taken by surprise or caught off guard. But other than that, he is super. I mean, he's like he was in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He's right on base. So
it's kind of a shame that I wish because Karloff did like Lights Out and Suspense and all these appearances in these shows, are hosting these programs.
Yes. Lugosi would have been a great host.
He would have been fantastic.
Yeah, he would have really eaten that up. He would have a great charm and everything with it, and if he had been given the chance. And you know, it was of course a very different world in the 1950s. And you know, it's interesting because I think all of us sitting here today think it's really, really cool that he was buried in his Dracula cape. All right, I mean that's really neat. 1956, though, you figure if somebody's going to read it, they're going to think, oh, whoa, what went wrong with this man that he would allow that to happen? You know, a different kind of sensibility, different kind of approach to the situation. And so he may have been in some ways both ahead of his time and maybe a little bit behind his time in his style of acting and everything, and the way he trained in the theater and the way he became an actor. But also a little bit, you know, he seems almost expressionistic today. Like he knows exactly what he's doing. That maybe what the things that you would have seen that you think, well, it's too bad he didn't do this, that, or that, almost seem like they're intentional. It's part of part of what he is.
And I think, despite the fact that maybe Lugosi's and Karloff's careers definitely went different directions at a certain point, I mean, I think it's safe to say that today they're both equal in their legendary status.
They are.
You know what I mean?
They are. They were not. I would have to say they were not in their lifetimes. That certainly Karloff had a much bigger edge from the time Frankenstein was released, and that Lugosi was a fairly distant number 2 boogeyman, as they would call him back in those days. So there really wasn't too much of a contest at that point, if any at all. Today there really is.
Now I would argue that probably Lugosi is the more recognizable character as Dracula, when people do their impressions of Dracula, it's always Lugosi.
It is. It is.
always
It's not Christopher Lee.
No,
It's
whereas-
not Frank Langella.
No, whereas the Frankenstein monster is, if anybody does it, it's
Glenn
they do the
Strange.
Glenn Strange.
Yeah.
version.
True,
Yeah,
exactly.
which of course is easier to imitate than
Yeah.
Sure, of course.
the body language that Karloff did and everything. But yeah, I think that it's really is very, very gratifying and very cool to see that the recognition that Lugosi received in recent years.
Yeah.
That he was so underrated in his lifetime.
I will say this though. I mean, towards the end of his life, I mean, he was befriended by Ed Wood, and there were many young people who were so thrilled and so honored to have Bela Lugosi on their set. And granted, yes, Ed Wood's films, they're not great films by any by any length of, but look. They were thrilled, and they gave him as much attention as possible.
And Ed Wood believed in Lugosi.
Absolutely.
They
And he gave him
work.
everything. And Lugosi gave him everything he had.
Right.
Yeah, he really did. I mean, there was no sense of, well, I'll drop in here and just kind of give him a break. I mean, he's giving his heart and soul in those movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as the 60s came, you saw Karloff, he did the Corman films, the Raven, the Terror. He would go overseas and did Mario Bava's Black Sabbath, which is fantastic. He would make fun of his persona in some of the AIP films, like Ghost in the Invisible Bikini, Mad Monster Party.
Sure.
Yeah.
He was able to kind of still successfully play with his image, for a new generation.
The Grinch.
Yeah.
He became
The
this
Grinch.
children's storyteller.
For a whole new generation. I always wondered if Lugosi had better health and if he lived longer into the 60s, the way Karloff did, what kind of stuff he would have done,
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that if he had lived longer after the shock theater craze in 1957, 1958, he would have found a lot more work, a lot more recognition.
Yeah.
It's funny, we were talking about Karloff on our holiday special, actually.
Yes.
And it was interesting that, you mentioned that we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein, and on the cover of the Time magazine is a picture of Boris Karloff as Frankenstein.
Oh, really?
And how everyone knows when you think of Frankenstein, everyone thinks of Boris Karloff as Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
At Christmas time, everyone knows the Grinch.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's right.
even with these new versions coming out, the classic Grinch narrated by Boris Karloff and doing the voice of the Grinch, where he won a Grammy and an Emmy. I mean, that's what he's remembered for. So it's funny how not only is he remembered as a monster, but also as this wonderful Christmas character, which goes on and on. I really feel that Boris Karloff his memory will never die out.
No, I think he was a very beloved actor and a very beloved man. And, there was just something with both men that they had this great star quality, a very different kind of star quality they each had, but they really had it. They whatever you need to be a star on the screen, the way you look, the way you move, the way you talk, what you have inside of you that people say, they both really had that. And people really reacted to it, and they're still reacting to it, which is wonderful.
There's also a parallel between the two of them when it came to their physical disabilities and the fact that they did all these movies working through pain.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that maybe that work helped with that pain.
It did. I'm sure that it was, Karloff, it was his first love to be an actor. And he, like I said, he was passionate about acting. And, you look what he did at the end of his life. He did everything that would come along, basically. And you kind of wondered sometimes. I remember him appearing on Shindig, when I was a teenager, singing the Peppermint Twist. And I remember very well he was seated the entire time because he was ill at that point. He really couldn't stand to to perform. And there was this, to me at the time, like this ancient-looking man there, singing the Peppermint Twist, and there are these gals in disco boots dancing around him while he sits in his chair. And I think, what is this man thinking to do this? But I think he felt, I've been so lucky and so blessed to have been able to do this for so many years that if somebody invites me to do this, it would be churlish of me to say no. It would be impolite to say no.
And he had a good sense of humor too.
And he had a great sense of humor.
And I always when I watched the Terror. There's the scene where the whole basement of the dungeon is flooding, and it's really Karloff in there, like he's wrestling with the character. And it's like it hurts me sometimes watching.
Yes,
because I heard that he got kind of sick afterwards and never completely recovered.
That's right.
But like you said, he was such a trooper. Even though he made, in reality, the last few films he made were these Mexican films.
Yeah.
In the 60s, House of Evil, The Fear Chamber, The Snake People, and usually he was often seated or in a wheelchair. That was his character, and he made those. But it was great that the one film that he's probably remembered for in the later part of his life was Targets.
Yeah.
Because it was such a passing of the baton of the old school Gothic horror to the kind of the new horrors of the real world of today.
Yeah.
But it was like, I'm glad he got to do a role like that. And again, it's something that if Lugosi lived, if he ever could have done something along those lines, where he could look back at that kind of,
somebody would have discovered him and given him like the Tarantino treatment.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
exactly.
At that time.
I will
Exactly.
say this. There was a great story about Peter Bogdanovich when he was doing Targets, and he actually went on to explain this, that there was this scene where Karloff's character has this big, long monologue, and this was one of the last shots of the day, and it was going into the night, and the crew was frickin' tired. I forget how many hours it was, but the scene that they were doing, the last thing was this monologue, and everyone's like, oh, God, we got Boris Karloff, and Karloff came in, action. He did the whole monologue. Perfect. One take, cut, and it was over 2 minutes long. And then Bogdanovich, oh my God, that was perfect. And the crew went nuts and they all applauded because they knew, oh my God, we get to go home. Yeah. But that's a true testament to Karloff. Even though he is in pain and it's late at night, he was a constant professional. He knew his lines.
Absolutely.
He knew, and he could perform it, you know?
Yeah.
That's the true test of a real pro.
And that's the thing, too, that he never gave a bad performance, really.
No,
he always, no matter what it was he was in.
No. He didn't want to be anywhere else. And even in some of the films that people say he isn't good, for example, House of Frankenstein, I'm not sure how else you could play that part. You know, you're playing a madman who unleashes all these monsters. If he tried to, ham it up a bit or tried to put comedy in, it would have ruined the entire movie.
Right.
He's chilling, I think.
He had to play it on that note of determination. And everything, or the whole movie would have just gone, turning completely to mud. He had to bring that kind of real grim conviction to it. So he knew what he was doing, and you get the impression whenever you're watching him act, he would not have wanted to have been anywhere else. This is what he was born to do.
Absolutely.
This is what he loved doing. This is what he looked forward to doing. Hopefully as soon as possible after he finished this job. He just absolutely loved it, and. It's very moving. I think both men felt that way. I think they, that they just loved what they did.
I mean, and let's face it, really. I mean, you have Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, you have a lot of big horror stars, but I mean, I think it's safe to say that Karloff and Lugosi are the most well-recognized, biggest iconic names in
without a doubt
in horror, or even in to a point in all of Hollywood. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
just
I would put Chaney maybe in there.
Yeah, but like to the point where like Karloff often got billed just as Karloff. You know? I mean, it's like
he was really up there. They both were, and I think it is, and I think again they have that. It's funny that. When James Whale cast Karloff in Frankenstein, he said, it was his face, but also he said, as he put it at that time, he said it was his queer, penetrating personality that he had. And, it's interesting because people frequently say Lugosi was a personality and Karloff was an actor. But I think they were both those things. They were both actors and personalities. And Karloff had, was a very versatile actor, but there also was this something in him that, this personality that you kind of bonded with when you first became a Karloff fan, and it was always there.
It's that it factor.
It really is.
That's right. The it factor. Yeah, exactly.
I think it has a lot to do with the voice too.
And the voice.
Lugosi had the Hungarian thing, but Karloff had that little lisp.
And that's another thing too. The fact that you could take that lisp and make it almost malevolent.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes. One of his favorite lines for me is in The Black Cat, and it's not a profound line. It's just a pleasantry exchanges with Lugosi and David Manners. And Manners says, Pelzig is one of Austria's greatest architects. And Karloff says, he's supposed to say, and Dr. Vertigast is one of Hungary's greatest psychiatrists. Now, that's a hard line to say if you lisp. All right? And it's a show in itself to hear Karloff say that. And Dr. Verdigast is one of Hungary's greatest psychiatrists. And you think the director, Edgar Allan Price said, cut, okay, bring in some towels. All right. Boris, go over and dry out for a while. We'll try it again later. Yeah.
One take.
One take.
That's right.
Now, my understanding is, like you mentioned before, that Karloff he loved to work. And towards the end of his life, he did not want to stop. But
No.
he was not feeling well. Now, the story I had heard was his agent knew that Karloff needed some arrest. And so he actually lied to Karloff. He actually said, so you need to take a rest because we got another part for you in a couple months. And Karloff wanted to know about it. He goes, I'm ironing out the things. You just need to go and you need to rest, and so we can do this thing.
Yes, and because he couldn't have stood to have been told, this is it. This is your last job.
Right.
Yeah, and of course, he came to Hollywood in the fall of '68, and he did that Red Skelton show, which is also now available. And the story of Vincent Price frequently told that when they did the rehearsal, Karloff did it in a wheelchair, and they came off stage, and Karloff called Vincent Price over, and he said, I think the audience was afraid to laugh because when they saw me in the wheelchair, they felt sorry for me. Do you feel that? And Vincent Price said, I couldn't lie to him. And said, well, Boris, maybe. But what else can you do? Karloff said, well, I can do it standing up. So he does the whole show standing up with a cane, moves very well. At one point, he sort of leans back against a wall at one point and kind of props himself up. But he does that whole comedy skit, with a cane, walking when he really should not have been out of a wheelchair.
Right.
So these are troopers with capital T's. This kind of above and beyond the Call of Duty work.
Well, Greg, this has been great.
This has
been awesome.
To have a Karloff Lugosi
to
expert.
tackle this huge of a subject with a true authority on the subject is great.
Well, thank you. You guys have been super and a lot of fun.
Awesome.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Well, look,
Yes.
well, what I want to know, though, is now I know you've done a lot of books. Is there anything that you're working on? Is there anything that our listeners can look for coming up? Or?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes.
Smooth. Dr. Segway.
Wow, that was I'm impressed. That was actually there is a book coming out this month about the actor Colin Clive.
Oh, right.
No. Awesome.
Yes.
There's not a lot of I'm so excited.
Yeah. And he is it's a very good human interest book, I think. He had a very sad life, very brief life.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of things about his early life, which I had never known, was very surprising, which I'll say was a surprise when the book comes out. But he was, it turns out he was really already sort of a rather a ticking time bomb by the time he came to Hollywood in 1929.
Oh, really?
Some very, very tragic things that happened in his life. And so it's really quite an emotional story. It was actually really quite draining to write it. Usually you can develop a little bit of a detachment while you're writing a story like this, but in this one it really I was ready to go check in somewhere for a while after finishing this book because it really took it out of me. It's a very sad story, and of course he was a wonderful actor, and of course a lot of connections to Karloff, and to James Whale. Very, very brilliant actor, and a too short life, and it was a very adventurously written book. I'll say this, and that's because of trying to visit as many places and so on and so forth related to his life. Right. And I'll just mention that one of the places here in Los Angeles that I went to was the building where, to get a picture, was the building where his funeral took place in 1937, which is down on Venice Boulevard, not too far from USC. And when I went there, it was no longer a funeral home. It was a community PTA and dental clinic. Oh, wow. And I don't know how long it had been since somebody had been in there, but I thought, well, it looks like the door's open. So I walked in, and immediately this 300-pound guard with a gun came up.
Wow.
Said, what are you doing here?
You hear about Colin Clive?
Yeah. And he had not heard of Colin Clive. So I had to do a lot of shuffling to try to get me out of that one. But he a very, very interesting story.
And I don't think his story or his I don't think there's been much written about him, though.
Not a lot. I wrote a shorter story about him years ago in a book called Hollywood's Maddest Doctors about him and Lionel Atwill and George Zucco. Right. But there's a lot of new information,
awesome.
lot of stuff about
Greg, what is the title of this new book?
It's called One Man Crazy, The Life and Death of Colin Clive.
Oh, all right. Check it out.
And of course, One Man Crazy being one of his big lines in Frankenstein.
Oh,
Right.
And
great line.
Yeah, and sort of a double meaning line in the title, but again, we'll leave that for people to discover.
Nice. Awesome.
So that's the most recently finished book, and that should be available now. So,
right.
Yeah, as you can find if you check under my name on on the computer, you should be able to track it down.
Thanks so much.
We're doing
Greg.
it now.
Please do.
Again, Greg, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been awesome.
My pleasure.
Cheers to Boris and Bela.
Boris and Bela.
We love you.
Indeed.
Time for listener shout out.
Shout out.
This goes out to Stephen Parker from Auburn, Georgia.
All right,
Steven
Steven Parker, I love your games. You and your brother.
Stephen is now the proud owner of a Monster Party t-shirt.
Oh my God.
That was purchased for him by his daughter, Miranda Parker.
She's the greatest daughter ever.
Who wrote a note saying, "This is a gift for my dad. He's my best friend, and he's such a huge fan of your podcast. His name is Stephen, and this is going to be the perfect Christmas gift."
Now you're our best friends.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So thank you, Stephen, for listening. Enjoy the t-shirt. Thank you, Miranda, as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's also remind our listeners that you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at Monster Party TV, our Twitter handle at Monster Party HQ. Instagram is also Monster Party HQ. If you're listening to us on iTunes, please take a moment and write a review. Chances are we will read it on the show.
When would we not read it?
And speaking of Monster Party merch, you can find it on our eBay store, which is Monster Party Store, and that's easy to remember.
Wait a minute. Got it.
I also want to give a special thanks to our sponsors at Creature Features. Creature Features. Now you got to go to their store on eBay, which is C-Features, and they have all kinds of great stuff for sale. They have models and toys and CDs and books and all kinds of fun things. So you got to check it out. Well, books on Karloff and Lugosi.
There you go. Nice.
Magazines and all kinds of great stuff. So go check them out on eBay. C-Features is their store handle. I also want to give a special thanks to Time Tunnel Toys. Time Tunnel Toys, located at 1583 Meridian Avenue in San Jose, California. And Joe and Sharon have an amazing store filled with all kinds of wonderful vintage toys like Star Wars figures and Micronauts and Transformers and Black Velvet paintings and the Keep America Strong Watch Horror Films poster that they've created, and it's awesome. I suggest you check it out. But it also, if you go to their website at Time Tunnel Toys, you'll be able to find out more information on their San Jose Super Toy Comic and Collectible Show, which is about every 4 months. It's a convention filled with hundreds of tables with dealers from all over the country selling all kinds of vintage toys.
Hey, how about this? What about a Keep America Strong Black Velvet poster?
Ooh.
Very cool.
I'm going to have to talk to Sharon about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Good idea, huh?
Great idea.
On that note, I am Matt Weinhold.
I'm Sean Sheridan.
I'm Larry Stroth.
And I'm James Gonis.
Keep America strong!
Watch anything with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. And we'll see you all at the Film Stars Frolic.
Have you done podcasts before?
You know, I only by the phone, never actually in a studio.
Oh, well.
Never again, right?
So yeah, just talking on the telephone to
This is way more fun. Looking
this is
into the
actually
eyes
seeing
of
the people. Yeah.
rabid nerds.
That's right.
Who
Rabid
hang on
nerds.
your every word.
I love it.
That's a different energy when you're all together.
That's right.
Yeah.
Is this your book, Sean?
No, must be.
Is this?
That's mine.
That's cool. Did you want this down there? No.
Eventually. I want to... I wanted Greg maybe to sign it. I don't know. I don't want to get all weird about it, but yeah, I don't know.
Maybe we should get
kind of
through
important to me.
Maybe we should get through the show first.
Exactly.
Because he might go, those sons of bitches.
Yeah.
What do they
Thanks
know?
for nothing.
That's right. GWM. That's right.
So Okay, so just as a reminder, what we're going to do is we're going to do our introduction, and we say who we are, we say what the topic is, and then we're going to do an introduction to you, and then we're going to go to town. Who's doing the introduction?
I am.
All right. Do his name last. You know what I mean? Build him up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Because someone didn't do that last time.
Ooh.
Oh. Wow. Let me get out my journal of your mistakes, Larry.
Wait, I did do that last time.
Yes.
No, you didn't.
You didn't. You didn't.
For Greg.
I even told
said
you.
his name first.
Yeah.
And went into what he does.
Oh, shit.
Yes.
Oh,
I came this close to going, Matt, can we do... Then I go, you know what? No.
It was fine, though. It was fine.
It's okay. No, we had to junk the entire episode, but that's fine. That won't happen here, Greg.
Okay, I'll trust you.
All right. So here we go. Ready?
No.
Oh.
No.
Are we calling this? Are we simply calling it
Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi.
Okay.
Are we actually saying Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, not Karloff and Lugosi?
You could call it that too.
Fine with me.
Yeah, I think
Because
it's
that's
better.
like...
I like it.
That's like...
No, I like it.
King and king, you know, come on. Instead of like...
Yeah.
No,
Did you want to do middle names too?
You have convinced original names.
Oh, yo, there you go. Okay.
Yes,
right.
yeah, that's gotta that
right.
rolls off the tongue. Are you peeing?
You know,
So
Nervous
rude.
over there, yeah.
you know,
There's a girl over here.
oh, like you've never seen it before. Okay, come on.
I'm so sorry.
No.
He gets like this sometimes.
We're all okay.
We're all good. Levels good.
Hello.
It sounds good, right? Everybody sounds good?
Sound good?
Yeah.
I like it. Okay.
Who's ready to do this?
I am.
That's it.
Okay, let's do it. Ready?
Yeah.
On that note,
I'm Matt
Thank you,
Weinhold.
American
I'm
Strong.
Sean Sheridan.
watch Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi movies.
In everything. In anything. Yeah.
Watch, oh yeah. Watch Bela Lugosi.
Watch every Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi movie.
There
And
is.
is there one like a famous quote we could say at the end from one of them?
And continue to listen to Monster Party with music they play. No.
But see if we do that, then we're
I know.
favoring one person.
Well,
over the other.
you're right. You're right. I guess.
have to do-
I guess we can't, can we? I guess
Wrong.
we can. We,
Wrong
no,
again,
it's
Larry.
like-
Well, what's with the pairing of them in?
or
Is there?
or
Is there an exchange?
what we do
Yeah,
is we
Yeah.
each take a short line. Now, look,
Jesus
Karloff,
Christ.
Lugosi, Karloff. Look, listen.
a podcast within a podcast.
You say fire bad. You say what music they play, and I
Music
say,
they play or make?
make, and I say
You don't know anything about Karloff or Lugosi.
I know.
Get out.
I know.
Get out.
You know what? I know a lot.
I know you
I was going to go into all kinds of other
know,
shit,
I know.
but
You-
our
you came-
expert was going on. Oh, okay, I guess we're going to blow
dare-
over this.
how dare we let her
you
get
know?
stuck.
I mean, come on. There was all kinds of stuff I wanted to talk about his early life. You know,
Yeah.
there's not a lot to know, and I know a lot about his early life.
So do I.
Well, why didn't you bring it up?
There was no place for it. We were having a nice flow.
You know what? You make a place. You make yourself known. That's what you do.
That is your modus operandi when it comes to podcasts and interviews.
It's not my
Make
modus.
a place.
No, it is not my modus
Bulldozer
operandi.
your way into
It
that
is not.
conversation.
It is find a moment.
Dig me, America. Okay, all right. Well,
I
Keep
had
America
a nice,
strong.
I had a nice suggestion. Forget it.
this is Larry's last show.
I'm trying to think like.
At least I went out on a high
You
note.
did. No. You were terrific, Larry. I'm going to take all the sarcasm and jokes out of my voice. And
Use that filter, that sarcasm.
yeah,
filter,
let me hit the button. Let me hit the button right now. Let me hit the sincerity button. But yeah, you were terrific.
You know,
and so are you, Sean.
Oh, Sean's always great.
James. No, I thought it was a very nice team effort.
Actually, it was. Yeah, I think we all because you could tell we're also pretty familiar with this topic, so we all were anxious to kind of get in there, and I think it was good.
Yeah.
Well,
There's a lot of love.
I want to know what you really think.
About
What do you about?
I think objectively it was a very good show.
Yeah, me too.
I think that everybody was on their game.
That should be the blurb for this. So, listen, objectively, I think it was a very good show.
You know, it's funny that when at least on
James
my phone,
GONIS says adequate.
on the app when I look at the review, the first one that comes up is the one that says very frustrating.
But that was 9 years ago.
But that's the first one.
I know, but it is annoying that that's the one you always see. You can't change that, right?
Yeah,
who cares?
No.
Yeah, but you also see on top 5 stars.
It's also good to have like a negative one because then it's like it shows that there's controversy.
Well, James can put one up. It says adequate.
Lose the other 3 guys.
Give James more time.
Yeah.
What?
Right, so
call it GONIS party.
He wants to give you more time?
Party.
So wait, what are we going to say at the end?
What are we going to say? People have to go to work.
Yeah, how about like just, it's alive, it's alive, it's alive, it's alive. Or something. But that's not. But that's Colin
that
Clive.
could be fun.
But that's Colin Clive saying it's all
that's
to Frankenstein.
Yeah, again.
Dracula and Frankenstein, like equal thing from both of them. I don't know. If you say, watch Boris Karloff and BELA LUGOSI movies,
and get your back checked out.
That's actually no. I thought that was funny because they both had. Well, they both. I don't know. Oh, you want to make?
Did he have back?
And don't get hooked on methadone. Is that what you want to do?
Stay off the dope, kids.
Oh, come on! Okay. It can't be this difficult. Aren't you guys all?
Give me a second.
Yeah, let's whip out the computer.
The taglines of some of their movies, maybe like
the Black Cat or the Raven or something like that. Yeah. Oh.
Shall I go to the restroom while you guys are looking for this?
Do you need to go to the restroom?
No, I can hold
it. Don't think about it. That's the only thing, Larry. Just don't think about it.
No,
don't think about peeing. Don't think about that gushing Niagara Falls of water.
What's that green dragon from, by the way?
Fin Fang Foom.
Thank you, Sean. From Marvel Comics.
Oh.
From the Jack Kirby, all the Where Monsters Dwell.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, what's great about that one is that was one of those Build-A-Figure.
Is that what it was?
And you had to get all the Hulk. They did a Hulk run, and and it's like any of those things, some of the figures are like, did I need Doc Samson? No. And then there was a She-Hulk that was okay. Right. It wasn't that I don't like the character, it was just not that great of a figure.
Yeah.
But there were like 3 or 4 really cool figures, and then you get that. And so
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I love Fin Fang Foom. What's the name of the thing that the parade that didn't go well?
Film Stars Frolic.
And we'll see you all at the Film Stars Frolic. Is that funny?
Make sure that's what it was called.
Yeah, make sure.
Pull the string. Pull the string.
Yeah, but then that's
again. That's
this is. What have you said? It's alive. Pull the string. It's alive. Pull the string.
Well,
which is it? I don't know. There's no ending. And then it's like comparing his most famous role to Lugosi's worst role.
Yeah, that's not cool. Yeah. That is not cool.
Yeah. I don't want to be a dick.
This is it.
No.
I don't know. Not this one. And see you are at the Film Stars Frolic.
I like it.
That's cute.
And people will have to go, what was that? Oh, that's that.
It's the thing from the place.
I like it. It makes people think.
It's a thinker. Yeah, the best kind of comedy.
Okay.
Well, isn't it you that says that you like comedy that makes you think a little bit? Or
there's like
teach
my class now.
Yes, please tell me, Mr. Comedian
sometimes teacher. Sometimes a thinker is bad because it pulls you out of something that you're like the rhythm that you're getting from watching a comedy.
Right.
Like especially if it's like joke after joke after joke.
Yeah.
If there's a thinker, then you go whoa, and then you miss 3 more.
Right.
But if the joke is a really good thinker, it's it's case by case.
I see.
I'm definitely cutting this part out.
All right, let's do this.
All right. Because James yawned. And it's always a sign.
You yawned a minute ago, too.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
I did not. It wasn't a yawn?
Okay.
No, he just mimed oral sex.
Okay. You just love that microphone.
All right, go.
Hey, Matt, did you guys go to G-Fest?
Yeah.
Funny you should mention
Yeah,
that
what's the
because we
deal?
did.
Oh, it was awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a great time. We were there.
It seems like you were there for ages.
Oh my God, we've been going there for months.
We're just reliving it because we loved it so much.
The con was only 3 days, but we keep going back to the hotel and bothering the staff.
Oh, man.
But it was great. We saw a bunch of our fans and we saw wonderful kaiju stuff, and it was
amazing. Dealer's room.
Oh man, a lovely convention.
Yeah.
And we have some wonderful audio from that convention.
Cool.
Here you go.
Here we are at the Kaiju Cast listening party at sort of the after party, the official after party, or the unofficial after party for G-Fest.
The official, unofficial, official party at the Crown Plaza.
Right. And who do we run into? Then longtime Monster Party listener, Thomas Fitch. Thomas, hey.
Hi, Monster Party. It's nice to see James Gonis back here and Matt Weinhold here for the first time.
That's correct, yes. And loving it big time.
Loving it.
Oh, excellent to hear. Have you guys, what have you seen at the show that you've really enjoyed the most? Or
Everything.
Oh, okay.
Well, we haven't been to the Artist Alley yet.
Okay.
Which we're looking forward to. We're going to hit that tomorrow before the thing closes up. But, you know, the dealer's room, of course, is, you know, first and foremost on our mind.
And then we're pretty much trapped in there because it's like we're compulsively making the rounds. What did we miss? There's so much to see. It's crazy.
There's so much to see that I'm on the lookout for like a X Plus Ultraman C-type appearance pose. And I haven't seen one, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't in there, and I walked past it twice.
I know.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Or maybe the dealer didn't have it out today, but they'll have it out tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. But definitely you're going to want to hit the Artist Alley because there's some awesome stuff that people are doing down there. Like Lenny Romero is doing an excellent, I almost want to say it's just ink and paper or pencil and paper, but it is amazing the detail that he's doing. It's almost photorealistic. And then obviously Matt Frank and Jeff Zornow, who worked on the Godzilla comics, are amazing and great guys to talk to. Very enthusiastic and on like a different scale of their enthusiasm. I don't want to say wholesome versus a little unwholesome, but maybe.
We like unwholesome. We're fine with that.
Definitely say hi to Jeff Zornow. Because he must be destroyed.
Now, Thomas, you live here in Chicago or nearby?
I do. I live in South Chicago.
Cool. And you were saying earlier that you're actually are working now at G-Fest, or you volunteer?
Just volunteered this year, so it's a couple-hour blocks each day that you help out. Usually it's monitoring a display room or something, and it's not that difficult. It's and very enjoyable. I got to meet a lot of people and stuff. I didn't realize it was going to be as sociable volunteering as it is just being at the convention, doing your own thing however you want. The volunteering, I was like, I've met like dozens of people I've seen every year for years and never said anything more than, hey.
Is the first time you volunteered?
Yes, this is my first time volunteering.
You going to do it again?
I think so, yeah. It turned out to be a funner experience than I expected. You know, you get the details and you're like, oh, this could be slow and boring. But no, it turned out to be, like I said, really enjoyable.
Very cool.
I want to be, if I was going to volunteer, I would want to do the Godzilla or oversized costume wrangling for the costume contest.
Yeah, the JoJo Studios handles all that, and it's, yeah, I don't know how those guys do it all because there's so many costumes, especially children's costumes, that I would be overwhelmed trying to get it organized and how to which order to do things, how fast they have people come out during the parade, and it's like herding cats, I think. You know?
Speaking of kids, one of the things that I love seeing at the show is that there's so many kids who are into it. You know, you see kids playing in the hallway with vinyl toys, and it's like, yes, this is the future of Godzilla fandom.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous because I'll like buy some vinyl toys, and then I'm like, I want to play with these, but the magic isn't there for me anymore. It's more like, I'm going to display this and then, look at it every day, which is also nice.
Look, if we have enough cocktails, we'll get you to play with your toys.
We're going to sit down in that corner over there.
Yeah.
So you guys are going to get me drunk and make me play with some toys. So
Yeah, we'll set up a city out of empties.
based on the amount of people here, I might not be the first person to be able to get to the city of empties to destroy it.
What does this patio look like at 2 in the morning? That's what I want to know. I think there's some vinyl play going on here.
I'm guessing a lot of empty bottles and, chairs strewn here and there.
So what's one of the things that you enjoy most about this convention? Is it the dealer's room, or is it the costume contest, or a particular panel, or meeting the celebrities?
The thing I'm on the lookout for every year is something that is new to me, like being introduced to, we didn't have Spectre-Man where I grew up in Detroit, or at least if we did, I didn't catch it in my growing up. But those type of things, Spectre-Man, Space Giants we didn't have, Gamera I saw for MST3K for the first time. But those type of things, movies I've never heard of, those properties I haven't seen. And then another thing is, I've been coming since 1996, so this is the 25th year of it, and so I guess I've been to 22. I think I missed 95 and 2005. Yeah, so seeing all the familiar faces is a huge draw as well. And
isn't it amazing the sheer amount of those tokusatsu shows that they made? Like, you're talking about all these shows that you weren't able to see, and then there are so many other ones that never even came to America, and they just go on and on. Every time I think I've heard or seen everything, there's 10 more.
Yeah. When the show went out to California, I think it was in '99, I was introduced to like Akuma-kun and Ogon Bet and Gegege no Kitoro is one of them. Yeah. So, these were things I was on the lookout for, and I was like, oh my gosh.
My wife and I went to Shigeru Mitsuki Road, which is the yokai Kitaro town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's super cool.
And today, even today, I found a DVD of a sequel to Message from Space, which even as much as we know about all this obscure stuff, I never knew there was a sequel to Message from Space.
I did not know there's a sequel to Message from Space. It's not The War in Space, is it? Or is it?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty obscure.
And then, James, you'll give me stuff that, like, okay, I know that there's Zatoichi, but I didn't know there's a Zatoichi musical, and a Zatoichi, and then there's a female Zatoichi, and there's so much. I mean, Japan is amazing when it comes to output.
Yeah. I don't know how they can keep up putting out as many Ultraman series as they've done, and without having done an Ultra Woman series. I'm like, all right, that should be the next step, people. An Ultra Woman series, I think it would work out.
Who doesn't want to see that? We got Ultra Mother, and that was fine, but that's not enough.
No, I agree. That's not enough. It would be, especially now with the popularity of like Black Widow and the Avengers and stuff, where people are like,
Wonder Woman.
Let's see a movie with Black Widow, another Wonder Woman movie.
And now that there's a female Doctor Who,
right?
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not? I would love to see it.
And they're not adverse to female hero characters.
Oh, gosh.
So why?
Yeah.
It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, Sailor Moon. All those, what are they called? The Magical Girl series, where they're like a witch or a wizard or something, and they're going to like a high school or whatever, and they have to defeat demons or giant monsters as well. Right.
Now, the last official Godzilla release was the first anime movie that came out. It's on Netflix. What are your thoughts on that?
I should have paid closer attention to when I was watching it, because it wasn't until I was listening to a different podcast and they were like, well, these were the Exians and these were the aliens from the third planet of the black hole. And I was like, I didn't catch that at all. So I'll have to watch it again. But I was kind of satisfied with it. I'm interested in the sequel.
I honestly didn't give it that much of a chance, because after about 15 minutes, I tuned out. Honestly, I just thought this is something that it just seems to be going off, and it doesn't feel like a Godzilla movie, and I just tuned out.
I think I got to agree with that too. There's when you tuned out about 15 minutes, I probably tuned out the same, which is why I didn't catch who they were and what they were supposed to be doing. Yeah, this is how tuned out I was. Oh, they were making Mechagodzilla? I had no clue. I didn't know that. Yeah.
What about Shin Godzilla? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I got to give it a thumbs up. I like it. I like all the politics and stuff. It's
great.
It's ridiculous because they want it to be ridiculous, but at the same time, you can feel the frustration of the. I don't know if he's the main character, but basically the main character, where he's like, "Come on, let's do something. Let's be proactive," and everybody's like, "Let's have a meeting and we'll discuss."
My wife and I laughed so hard because every time they went to a different meeting room, it was like a drinking game. And you'd be wasted by the end of it. They go through like 10 different meeting rooms.
Right. The drinking game is every time they go to a different meeting room, drink. Every time their title of their official capacity in government gets longer, take a drink.
I love that. I love the fact that they did something different with the Godzilla movie, and they made the response to Godzilla as interesting as Godzilla.
Mm-hmm. And the general attitude of fans here at G-Fest seems to be that they love Shin Godzilla. I mean, there's so many figures. There's even like pillows and variants. And I was
I got the pillow.
And I was in a panel where they were just somebody asked for a show of hands, like who loves Shin Godzilla, and it was almost everyone.
Well, that's excellent to hear because I haven't been able to gauge how the fans feel about it yet. But based on the amount of merchandise that's coming out and the stuff that people are buying, they took to the Shin Godzilla design really well, I think, like really quickly, and have embraced it wholeheartedly.
So general question, what's your all-time favorite kaiju movie?
Gamera 2 Advent of Legion.
Wow, cool. Yeah. That is a great movie.
I love that.
Yeah.
That whole Gamera series.
That whole Gamera series
you can't touch it.
Is amazing, yes. I just rewatched them to get prepared for G-Fest, and I was blown away by the special effects for all of them, and the storylines for all of them as well.
How about you?
Yeah.
My very, very favorite would be Monster Zero. My second would be Biollante.
Biollante is my favorite Godzilla movie, hands down. I rewatched that, and I was like, all right, it's been a long time since I watched the Heisei series, but it made me want to rewatch the Heisei series. The special effects in it are better than I remember. The rocket fire is more accurate. Once they're out of the ocean, the rocket fire becomes very accurate hitting Godzilla, and it's something where I'm like, why can't they just have the rockets always hit him? Because technology today, they're not going to miss.
No.
Which is demonstrated in Shin Godzilla when they pile it on him, and they hit exactly where they're trying to hit him.
On a personal note, 18 years ago when G-Fest was in LA, I got the Megumi Odaka's autograph, and she plays Miki Sagusa, the young girl who has a psychic connection to Godzilla, but it was a generic headshot. And I had a Xerox copy of a picture where she looks like she's communicating with Godzilla, and I was like, damn, why didn't I get her to autograph that? And for 18 years, I've been kicking myself, and today I had her autograph that picture.
Oh, that's amazing. You guys are going to have to scan that in and post it on your website and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's also, you can do your cosplay, your fantasy play of, oh, she's talking to me through my mind, yeah. Now, you didn't ask me what my favorite movie was.
Yeah, what is your favorite?
Okay, my favorite, it has to be categories because this is not a Godzilla movie, but War of the Gargantuas is way up there.
Yeah, it's amazingly good. It's one of those where I watch it and I'm just always enjoy it every single time. And it's fantastic.
That was another thing. One of my holy grails to buy at this show was the Bandai Gargantua figures that just came out. Okay. And they were actually at a reasonable price and plentiful. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, most of the stuff, except for, I don't know if they're con exclusives. There was a just Desu Goji, Godzilla from Destroyer, that was like a M1, I believe, and a Biollante Rose form also with a different paint scheme.
That sold out in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, basically, if you didn't have an inside connection, you were probably not going to get one. So.
Kevin Smith, our Monster Party unpaid intern, actually asked us to pick that up for him, and I failed. I could not get into the dealer's room quick enough.
Yeah, that's a shame.
We made some mistakes, but next year.
Mistakes were made.
Yeah.
Has Kevin's figure that he's working on come out?
Yes, it's just come out. The Mr.
Johnny Innsmouth.
Johnny Innsmouth, forgive me. Johnny Innsmouth.
Yes.
Oh. I'm Demon Booze, okay? Demon Booze.
The Cthulhu mythos and Godzilla, they go hand in hand, or tentacle and claw.
Yes, indeed.
For a second, I thought you had the Cthulhu shirt, but it's Gamera, which yet another. I mean, I'm telling you, there's too many good kaiju films.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, like with the Heisei films, my favorite was Destroyer. I really love Destroyer because I love the idea of Godzilla dying. You never saw that.
Yes.
And the way that they pull it off is breathtaking.
It is amazing. It's very emotional for me to watch it, and I'm always moved, and the music is moving. Yeah, they they handle it really well.
And the whole Meltdown image is a great image, and it's made for great vinyl figures, and also the opening scene in Hong Kong. You never see Godzilla in Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing I would like to change in that scene is the cars that are on the freeway driving towards Godzilla. And it's like...
hey, but wait a minute. There's always going to be those people.
Yes.
That would be us.
Yeah.
That would be us.
Let's get a closer look. Yeah.
They say if you get close enough, you die from radiation.
Thomas, it's great to see you here. Thanks so much for chatting with us. Much appreciated. And we look forward to hanging out tomorrow for more fun.
All right. Yeah, this is going to be great. It was great talking with you guys. And, this interview went well for me. I've had a lot of fun.
Let's do it every year.
Yeah, every year.
G-Fest! G-Fest! G-Fest!
Woo!